Just like to welcome you all. Before I go through the procedure, just like to introduce the hearings panel. My name's Gary Ray. I'm an independent hearings commissioner. I've been asked to chair this meeting. I've done that before on several occasions to assist with, in this case, a private plan change request, which is slightly unusual. It's not unprecedented, but it's something that I've been asked to assist the panel with to chair the meeting. So I'm a hearings commissioner based in the Tasman area. I've done about 20 hearings in this area, including the PC18, which was the plan change for the expansion of industrial zone in Cromwell, the Lake Dunstan cycleway, and also a private plan change request by Fulton Hogan up at Pies and Moorings. So I'm quite experienced in this area, so I'm glad to be able to assist. Now, with me today is the normal members of the panel, if you like. Tracy Patterson, and also Councillor Martin McPherson. And at the back, I believe we have Councillor Sarah Brown, who's here to observe. Is that correct? Yep, very good. All right, now we'll do some more introductions shortly, but I'll just go through a sort of formal procedure. This is a properly convened meeting of the Central Otago District Council Hearings Panel, called for the purpose of hearing a private plan change request by Hartley Road Partnership, known as Plan Change 23. And we're all familiar with the site just on the outskirts of Clyde for a proposed industrial zone. I'll just ask the Minutes Secretary, who's Taryn, to report on proceedings to date, please.
All statutory requirements under the first schedule of the Resource Management Act have been complied with. The Section 42A report prepared by the Planning Officer has been circulated to all submitters. And I'd just like to let you all know the meeting is being recorded, and a Section 42A report writer, Adam Vincent, will be coming in via Teams today.
Yep, thank you for that. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't explain the emergency procedures where, in the event of an emergency, to go out the door, we came in and proceed over to the church grounds, I believe. Okay, thank you. And I'll come to the timetable shortly, but in terms of the procedure, I suspect you're familiar with the procedure, but we'll start with the I'll call you the requester because you're not actually an applicant. It's a plan change request. So we'll start with the requester evidence, which has been pre-circulated, and then the panel will ask questions, and then we'll go to the submitters. And I believe Ms. Helen Axby's here today, and you'll be presenting later. We've also got NZTA coming in on Teams, Paul, and also Mr. Gordon Bailey from the Parks and Reserves Department of the Council will be coming in as well. And then we'll go to Mr. Vincent, who's online, who prepared the 42A report. We'll have some questions for him. I've also scheduled a site visit for the panel. I've been to the site yesterday, and the councils are well familiar with it. We'll only go back if we feel we need to, in terms of any matters that might come up with submissions. But we have got time to go back and have a look at the site. In terms of the afternoon, I don't think we'll take the afternoon tea break. We'll just box on, and the panel will have a cup of tea when we're discussing it later. So we don't need to hold everyone up for that. So we'll see how we go. But I'd be surprised if we need all of that time based on the issues in front of us and the number of submissions who are presenting themselves today. All right. Now I need to ask for a motion that the Section 42A report prepared by Mr. Vincent should be taken as read.
I can do that.
You can do that, thank you. And it'll be seconded by nothing. All right. I think that's just about it for now. Just to reiterate, the panel has read all the material. We've read we've read the original plan change request, the 42A report. We've read all the evidence that the requester has put forward, and I understand, Mr. White, you're the only witness as such, expert witness, and you'll answer any questions we have of the rest of the team, if you like. We've read those. We may have one or two questions that come up from those other reports that we can put to you, and if you're not in a position to answer them, we can ask for that in writing and send them on to the relevant person. So
I have anticipated that.
So that's fine, and it's probably a good time to ask you two to introduce yourselves, so we'll do that.
Good morning, panel.
Yep.
My name is Duncan White. I'm the planner on behalf of Hartley Road Partnership.
Yes.
On Barstow, who is one of the partnership.
So that's why I didn't get the name.
That lay on Vauxhall.
Okay. Yep.
One of Hartley Road partnership. And
Okay.
the requester and the descendant of the long-term owners.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. All right. Now, has anyone got any questions on procedural issues or anything else before we start? I think I've covered most things there. So, Vincent, you're online. Yep.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Everything's working. Yep. All right. No, that's right. I should mention that with the session is being recorded. Is that correct, Taryn? Yep.
Correct.
And we've got people coming in on Teams, so that's fine. All right. Look, without further ado, we'll hand over to you, Mr. White. You prepared a statement. You don't need to read that out, but you're welcome to summarise any key points you wish, and we'll have some questions we can ask of you when you're ready.
Thank you, Commissioners. Well, that's a direction from that one.
Okay.
But you would like me to present because
Okay. Yep. Sure.
the site's relatively straightforward. The plan change itself is relatively straightforward.
Right.
There are very little difference in contention between the request, the section 42A report and the evidence. There's a couple of things that have come up in some of the other matters evidence that might be worth a discussion, but
Yep.
everything is as per the section 42A report and the evidence. We'll have to answer questions than anything.
We might just do that. Yeah, I think because we have read the material, so we'll go straight to questions, and I'll hand over to my panel. I've got some, but maybe just from the start of the report to sort of work through progressively. Martin, did you have any generic questions at the start? Or,
I'll let Tracy go.
yeah, Tracy, go
I'll
first.
just
Yep.
make sure I've got my,
All right.
okay, right, bear with me. I've got lots of little sticky notes and lots of things here. I'll just go to some business in here. So one of the things that I'd really like you to explain to me is in relation to the water race. That's one of the things that really stuck out for me was understanding what has been done with the irrigation company, and especially in light of that, I guess the request is that there's going to be potentially for the flow to come back down and utilise that race in times of heavy flow. It's essentially the catching that runoff from the top side, that is. Could explain that, that would be great.
I can do that. There's various components to that question. Are you interested in the historic component of it or more?
I think I understand the historic part of it quite well, but it's more about how that's going to actually be utilised. And I'm very familiar with the site, but what I do acknowledge that I have not walked the water race itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So I guess it's about the water coming back down and utilising it, and if that's going to have any flow-on effects. And what the irrigation company has, if there's been any correspondence with the irrigation company and for utilising that.
The easement's been released that they had that was part of the process that we've.
Yeah, I saw that, but it's still existing now, isn't it?
Water races.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. But the easement, where's the title?
Gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And have they blocked off the end of the
The
race?
water race blocked off halfway along the cemetery reserve. It's physically blocked off, so it can't get past.
Okay, that was, yeah, as I say, I didn't actually walk the water race to see whether that was going to be, that was the one thing that was.
So that means you're not going to get any irrigation flow on it.
That's what I was wondering about. Okay, so it has
But
actually.
the race itself will still act like a cut-off rain.
Yeah,
So in times of high rainfall, any rain that falls above the race will obviously flow down the hills and be trapped by the race and then run to the west of the site and then between the site and the state highway.
yeah. And I see from the information that has been presented that there's going to be some further analysis to make sure that the race is suitable at the time of development, to make sure that it is actually suitable for that purpose.
That's normal at a plan change stage to essentially deal with proof of concept, and then any specific upgrades or works that are necessary are analysed and designed and required as a condition of consent completed prior to future development.
And one of the others, which was, I did actually raise earlier with Commissioner Reyes, about the boulders at the top of the hill and any impact of that. And I think just in light of what we've been hearing down in Roxburgh lately, the alluvial fan and that type of thing has really got, I guess, some of us a little more concerned. However, I do acknowledge that the risk is really low and that you guys have looked at the possibility of removing those if it's required at that stage. Is there anything at that development stage where you'll have someone else come back in to assess that, or?
There is a geotech report that was completed as part of the investigation because Amazon request. Again, it's one of those things that's normal once you're looking at detailed design to undertake a specific risk assessment of the specific development proposal and identify any remedial works that are necessary as part of that stage. And that would be expected as a condition of consent if it wasn't completed. Well, investigation completed prior and any works as a condition of any subdivisional development consent.
Where is that's it. I'm just going to find more right. With your test pit number 5, and this may be just the photograph, and this is on the big agenda there you've got, it's on page 271. Yeah, so I don't know what page it is on. Yeah, test pit 5, 271 of the big agenda. Is that water in the bottom of there, or is that something else in that photo? Test pit 5. Mm. Mm. So the bottom page on should be 271 of that big agenda. 271.
Are you looking at the image and seeing the?
Yeah, just in the bottom. I wasn't sure if that was that water or.
I would be very surprised if that is all.
Yeah, and I was just wondering whether it was hard to explain what that was, and I was just wanting to.
They didn't put water in the holes after they were done.
Oh, okay.
There's at the previous page, you can see the hose there with
Yeah.
water cut. They flooded it, then measured the soakage.
Measure the drop gets actually just how permeable the soil is, which is uniquely for storm drainage.
Yeah, I think there was actually a somewhere in here. There was a. I'm trying to find it. There was a diagram with all of that. It actually. Small. It's 347. So in relation to that, on page 347, there is, and this is about permeability graph. Just, I'm not 100%, I've not dealt with a lot of permeability graphs before. So I just wanted, in this page here on 347, it's a blue graph, and this is obviously in relation to that, and we'll probably talk about that, the flow of water out. Can you explain to me does that graph on page 347 indicate, what does it indicate, I guess? I mean, obviously it is the permeability. Does that allow us to know exactly how quickly that water is going to dissipate, or?
It does. It is a graph that shows the permeability at 3 depths below ground level. And in that particular test bed, all of those areas of the soil were found to have rapid permeability.
Okay.
Which is great, in
Yeah.
the sense that provides the ability to dispose stormwater
Yeah.
on site, and means that any water that falls on the site is likely to soak into it rather than run overland off it.
Okay, and look, hopefully I haven't missed it in the materials, but was there any analysis done in relation to the possibility of any underground aquifers that because of the permeability, it would run into any underground aquifers?
There is some discussion on those sort of components in both the infrastructure report, which is and an appendix by the application, and in relation to existing soil contamination, which is contained in the assessment in appendix H. And there's also some comments about it in the DOT report, which is appendix J to the application. And on page 3, appendix J, there's a statement. There's no sprinklers or ground units observed on the property and are unlikely in this terrain. Or on the opposite side, expressed that up in the south of the property encountered regional groundwater at 26 meters below ground level.
Oh, yeah, because I noticed that and I couldn't find the first relevance, that reference to the 26 meters. There was an earlier, that was the page, that's on page 290 for you guys, if you're looking at our reports. There was an earlier reference to a 30 meter as well.
Yes, groundwater's
So 26,
variable,
yeah,
and the terrain above the ground looks like it's slightly variable. So like 27 and 30 is possibly the same aquifer, just a slightly different depth or slightly different amount of substrate over the top of it.
yeah, so that one was obviously in relation to liquefaction. But as far as getting into the water, has there been, I mean, obviously that's the liquefaction side of things, but in relation to actually, if there was any movement into the water of anything that was coming through, I guess the question is 26 meters deep enough for it to be filtered through if something goes through into the aquifer?
Something from industrial activity at the top of the slide.
Yeah. Just because of the permeability.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not someone who I'm not an expert in that. That's why I'm asking the question.
There's various things there. There's the depth of groundwater,
Yeah.
the speed that it goes through the ground, and the chance of there being any activity in future that results in material contaminants getting into groundwater. There's another borehole that you drilled on the site, isn't there? But you didn't find groundwater at all. And I bet that was,
The deep they went to, I've got, they will deep for 36 metres. No groundwater potential from clay levels. So we tried to get, we drilled a bore in 1999. See if there's any potential for groundwater there, and there wasn't any. They drilled to 36 metres.
No, it'll be very deep. Okay.
I was just having a look through the soil contamination report, Appendix H, and that's really looking at the current state of the ground as opposed to future potential contamination.
Yeah, I see. I guess, okay, and in relation to water, and this is obviously, you talked about the bore, in the infrastructure report, it was recommended that there was the possibility of looking at an alternative for irrigation water, given that the recommendation is to have a reasonable amount of planting, or screening, I should call it. Has there been anything, have you done any further work on that? Obviously, I know you've just said the bore wasn't appropriate, but I'm just thinking about that whole ability to irrigate, especially if the intention is to irrigate at expensive town water costs.
Part of the investigations for the plan change have looked at the potential for a water supply at the sites.
Yeah.
And the only realistic alternative for water supply is connection to the town supply. So at this stage, it looks as though irrigation would be fine as supply.
Leave some more if you guys want to jump in.
Just on that, Mr. Moore's done a landscape report, and he's assessed the impact as low, provided. I think everything really hinges on planting the 10-metre strip, and there's a generic condition which we'll come to later, I suspect, about the wording of how that's to be implemented. But it doesn't appear to have done any sort of assessment of species or what sort of plants might survive there. And with the irrigation question is important too. So I guess that would come down to a resource consent application as to precise details. But this is a plan change request, so to rezone the land. I guess the panel, all we need to be conscious of is, will plants grow there? Can the 2 metres or height be achieved realistically within a reasonable time frame? Have you got any further comment? Because I don't think Mr. Moore's gone down that track too much.
No, it hasn't, and that's probably a reflection on the fact that this is a plan change.
Yes.
So
Okay.
there's been no detailed or specific design. It's the
No.
details detailed down, which is associated with the
Well,
yes.
Yes.
To look at that and to give you an answer about is it possible to get trees to 2 metres and then 4 metres, it is possible to buy and plant trees at height of 2 metres, but that's
Expensive.
But then if you look at the existing trees on the corner of Springvale Road, so 508, those are essentially wild trees that have established themselves there, that have grown to that height without irrigation. So there are species that will get to that height without any water. There are a whole lot more species and more appropriate species that would get to the same height with irrigation, to at least to the stage that they can get themselves established and get their roots down deep enough to get water.
Yeah, so you're confident. I mean, I'm not a local, but it appears a hostile environment for growing things, but I might be wrong. And you've made the point that there's some wilding trees there, but you don't see that as an impediment because the requester would be bound by that condition that requires it to be done, wouldn't it? Yeah, as part of the plan change.
The result of the the change request, there's rules that go into the district plan that then get implemented.
Yeah.
Future subdivision consent. Planning's consent.
Yeah.
And at that stage, we would expect that these rules will come down as condition of consent requiring the planting to be planted through the development phases. And then a condition of consent that requires that planting to be maintained in the future. So really the obligation is going to sit with the developer rather than the requester.
Yeah.
Though in this case, it is quite possible that the requester will become the developer in time.
Yeah, we just need to be sure that even though we can't just kick the can down the road to the consent, will plants grow there? Is it realistic they'll grow to 4 metres? And that's all we need to be satisfied at this stage, because as you said, the detailed species list is determined later, but at this stage, there's still a condition that's quite specific about what's required. Yeah. All right.
There are certain species in this environment that will be affected.
Yeah, you're confident about that. And I think, yeah.
Longer.
Right. And whilst Mr. Moore hasn't addressed it specifically, I think if he had doubts, he would have expressed those in his report about the ability for plants. And he hasn't done that. So, okay. Thank you. That was a follow-up to your question.
No, that's all right. And I think actually just following that in relation to your question, that ties in with the evidence of NZTA.
You're quite right. There's a funny dichotomy going on here. There's a request for screening to a certain height, and then at the same time NZTA saying, yes, we want screening, but we don't want the shading that's associated with it.
Yes, and I'm going to ask them when they come on why they are wanting screening. From a safety point of view. Well, I don't know whether you can comment on that, but we'll ask them. Yeah.
Well, I had some similar concerns about their specific proposals.
Yeah.
Myself, I'm happy to discuss those at the moment. Or do we want to wait until?
Maybe wait, yeah, because I should have pointed out that the requester has a right of reply at the end to respond to matters that come up during the hearing, so you're welcome to do it that way if you wish. Yeah.
Yeah, quite possible. I've been formed at the point of the larger hearing. It's really quite fire style.
Okay, now Martin, did you have any questions about planting or landscaping while we're on it?
No,
Okay, all right,
not about that.
all right, okay.
My questions are going to be around the projected use of this piece of land once it's, subject to the success of this application. We use the term industrial, and that sort of conjures up dark satanic mills. And it's green and pleasant land. Yeah, it's green and pleasant land. Yes, it doesn't. And I'm looking at the reports as read. It certainly is not that. But then I somewhere I saw real estate agents mention, and I thought, now that's fairly odd to have that area. Now, have I misread something, or what? It might have been referenced back to Cromwell, but just an idea of what sort of businesses you imagine going into that space, and then some sort of I think here the economic impact reports here really show that there is insufficient land going forward for the next 30 years, and that's the justification for this. But what sort of business do you see going onto the site, and where do you think they'll be coming from?
This procedure started, 2 years ago when we had some interest from various people looking for land suitable for various things. So until we got the rezoning, nothing further could happen. So that's when we started this procedure. And no one's going to commit to anything until we actually take it done. So whether those people are still there or not, we've been committed to trying to get this across the line. And so that's where we are with it. I don't know what other various, people might be interested, but there is some.
Yeah. It's a good long-term investment as opposed to a short-term.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a long game as opposed to a short game.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. I think so. I personally couldn't see it as a residential place for people to live personally. So that's what we've gone ahead with this.
If you look at the sort of activities that are establishing themselves in industrial of Cromwell, and the sort of businesses that are establishing the Alexandria businesses, the type of Alexandria industry, I would think that that would be somewhat similar to those. But at this early stage, there's no particular key thing that's lined up. And so nothing to indicate that it's going to be factors or businesses or any of those sort of activities.
That's the issue I'm raising, because Cromwell's had some issues with their industrial land, which is some of the activities in those areas be classed as out of zone, like retail and stuff like that. And it's been difficult for council to stop that sort of spread
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
some would say, inappropriate businesses
Or
and
commercial type
yeah,
activities.
well, yes, and the inherent conflict between commercial or activities and industrial activities, because there is that conflict.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, the intention here is to simply rezone the land to a current industrial zone so that any of the activities that are permitted in industrial zone would also be permitted here. And I'm not clear on whether real estate or commercial, I'm not clear on what the restrictions on commercial activities are in the zone, because you're not intending to do anything different to what the current zoning is that right?
Exactly. This
Yeah.
just takes
Yep.
existing industrial resource area,
Right.
applies it to
Yeah.
5, 6.
So any activity that doesn't meet the permitted activity standards or uses would have to go through a resource consent process.
Correct. Yeah, so
Okay.
there is inbuilt set of controls and sort of activities that can go.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
already within the rules,
Yep.
although as President,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
those industrial standards are quite permissive for the sort of activities that they do now. But that's a bigger issue with the industrial side
Right.
itself.
So yeah, it would be useful to know, and perhaps Adam might be able to help us as to how far it's a very permissive zone, but does it allow what sort of commercial activities does the zone allow? Like retail, for instance, does it allow for general retail? I presume not, but does it have to be associated with industrial activities?
The zone itself is very permissive, and if you look
Is
at
it?
what's going
Okay.
on from
Right.
there are
Okay.
activities that you would question whether they were actual industrial rather than commercial.
Okay.
Would be better off in the town centre.
Right. So does that cause any concern from a planning point of view from your?
It's a concern for the wider rules.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And I'm hoping the requesters proposal doesn't, well, it may trigger up council to do some more work, because apparently Clyde's got a plethora of cycle hire shops, and that sort of retail in this location. I mean, there could be an attraction because sites could be cheaper and things like that for that sort of thing to happen. And again, the risk, I suppose, is what you gain on the swings, you're losing on the roundabouts. You know, that might could cause relocation and emptiness in one area as opposed to and filling up another.
This cycle hire business is an interesting example. If you look at where those businesses are located in Cromwell, and there's 3 or 4 of them I can get off the top of my head, they are in the town centre.
Yeah.
As opposed to Roach on the way out, as opposed to the industrial area. And that, I think, is really a factor that the trail starts in the town centre in both Cromwell and Clyde.
I think Mr. Dimmock's email here is probably the key part. He says it's very enabling and provides for a wide range of industrial, commercial, retail, residential development as a permitted activity. Obviously, there's some restrictions on retail and residential,
Okay.
but it, like you pointed out,
It's very permissive.
it's very permissive.
And, yeah,
And that may have been a deliberate choice of council
Yeah.
to encourage economic activity.
Yes. Probably all of them, yeah. My other questions were, around NZTA, so I'll wait till, we have our friend online with his evidence. No, okay, currently,
that's what I'm from. Yeah, in terms of going back to the types of uses, and it's on the other side of the highway from Clyde. And it's clear that it's not just industrial activities that might go in there, under the proposal here. The Vincent, is it the spatial plan? Yeah, that identified some rezoning on this side, but probably not as much. Didn't include this site entirely, did it? But it certainly encourages some sort of activity over this side. Do you know whether that anticipated a wider range of uses than just industrial, like the commercial type uses that are included in the zoning? Do you know if it addressed that at all?
The structure plan identified a couple of existing sites that are already used for industrial type activities.
Right.
We have the contact storage area immediately opposite the site, and behind that is the Fire Emergency New Zealand operations area.
Right.
Which is a community activity, but it does have an industrial look to it, given it's their rural fire base and their training centre.
Right. Okay. Thanks. That was a more generic question about the types of activity. Are there any other specific questions anyone has at this point? Tracy, I'm sure you've got some.
I haven't, probably, I'm not sure whether, I guess, and I'm not sure whether it should come up later on when we've got Mr. Bailey online, but in relation to embalming fluid, and I wondered if you guys had considered the potential for a reverse sensitivity from a developer's perspective as a result of, but that's more probably a next side.
I'm going to answer that, and it may come up again. Are you interested in reverse sensitivity from a contamination point of view, coming from the cemetery onto the site?
Yeah.
That is addressed in my evidence. We asked specifically for some comments from the environmental scientist who looked at the contamination risk. And he
said it was very low.
He was quite surprised that it was even raised at all.
Yeah.
Given that
It's paragraph 34, isn't it?
Yeah.
The current cemetery is 170 meters away from the site. And any contaminants that come out of the environment, which is probably very low and limited only to the grades themselves, and already started 2 meters deep. His suggestion was that there would never be any contamination loss to the site from that particular activity, and also industrial activities tend to be at very low human health risk for attacks anyway, because the activities tend not to dig into the soil, to dig veggie gardens. So he wasn't at all concerned about the reverse sensitivity.
Mr. Midgley, was it? Yeah, I was going to ask Mr. Vincent to address that later, because that's a response to your 42A report, Mr. Vincent, and whether you've had any comment back from Mr. Bond, I think it is, as to whether there's any comment on that, any response, but you can tell us later if you wish, or you can tell us now while we're on the topic. Did you intend to address that, Mr. Vincent, later? Or
I had intended to, but I can do it now if that's easier.
But now I think, well, we've got it on our mind.
I did run Mr. Mitchell's comments past Ms. Bond, and she was happy. I think in terms of the cemetery side of it, she just wanted to make sure it was being addressed rather than having any specific concerns.
Okay, no, thanks. That's useful to have that feedback now, and thank you for that. Any other questions?
No, not at this stage.
Okay. All right, I'll keep asking questions for the moment as they come to mind. There's an underpass, isn't there? There's an underpass, Mr. White, isn't there, that links to the rail trailhead, and I had a look at that yesterday, and it appears from a casual observation to be working fine. There seems to be some sort of issue raised by NZTA's submission about that might need further investigation. What would be the need to investigate that in your view, do you think?
The only reason I could think that it might require more investigation is whether it provides cycling and pedestrian connectivity to the site,
Oh, I see.
and whether any additional signage was required.
Across Springvale, yeah, okay.
I think that's about as far as you would go with it. And I did note in the section 42A report that said this is something that could be addressed at the development stage, which
Right.
agree with, and that there are already an district plan that would enable that to be done.
Right, okay, thank you. And in terms of the other traffic, the proposal for a slip lane to take traffic coming down the hill into the site, that could all be accommodated on the road reserve, I presume, as far as you know?
And in fact, there's almost an informal slip lane there already,
Right.
which is not marked out as such.
Okay,
There was comments in the submissions on that, and some really major changes to a report and been followed and accepted.
right. And that sort of, I'm going to call it a lay-by area with the pines and, the informal sort of gravelled area. I drove in there yesterday. It's a bit hickledy-pickledy. What's the, that's road reserve, I presume. Is it council or NZTA or a bit of both, you think, or is it?
It's a bit of both,
A bit of both. And
and outside the site.
is that something that will that stay? I mean, those trees won't be removed, I wouldn't have thought, would they? Or is there any, they're not particularly tidy, but they are providing some screening, aren't they? So,
They are,
Yeah.
it's outside the site,
yeah,
and
Right.
there was no intention to do anything
right, okay,
through this. And the buffer strip
right.
is behind those trees anyway.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Trees at the site. So if those trees were to be removed in future, there would be screening provided by that buffer area.
It would still be there, okay. And some of the submissions have commented on the additional traffic that might go down Springvale Road or would go down Springvale Road to access the site. And have commented about, some submitters are concerned about the general increase in industrial or trucks using that route and so on. I read the traffic report Mr. Carr wrote, and that's Springvale Road is an arterial road, isn't it, in the district plan? So it's, as I understand the hierarchy, that's intended to take traffic or through traffic, and it's certainly not a local road or anything of that nature. Did you have any further comment on that?
I think that's quite correct. It is an arterial road, and the traffic assessment did note that there was capacity in that road for additional vehicle movements.
Right.
Without creating additional safety concerns, which was the main issue associated with the submissions.
Okay, thanks for that. I didn't have any further questions of I read the traffic report, and I didn't have any questions for Mr. Carr, so that was the only one I had really. And the slip lane can be accommodated on the road reserve.
And NZTS seem to be keen on that, so
Yeah.
that can be subject to detailed design development stage.
Yep. The other questions, I think I know the answers, but I'll put them to you anyway. In terms of the noise scenario under the industrial zone, there'd be the noise limits would be as per the district plan, which are higher than for a rural zone, aren't they? But I think it's 65 dBA instead of 55. That's all been assessed. No sensitive uses in the immediate vicinity. And I think in industrial zone, there'll be some allowance for residential activity associated with workers' accommodation, that sort of thing, or people who live on site to supervise and so forth. But I'd imagine there would be insulation requirements to achieve those sound levels. Would that be right? Most industrial zones have that, don't they?
Most of those come through the building act requirements, not the zone rules.
Oh, right. Okay.
The section 42A report did recommend some specific provisions compliant to noise
Yep.
as a result of the location adjacent to the
Cemetery, that's right, yes.
Value.
Yes, yeah, that's right. We'll have a closer look at some of those conditions later, but and I'll just stress for the benefit of submitters that when we talk about conditions, it's on the assumption that the plan changes are approved. It's not an outcome that we've already decided, but we do need to discuss those things in case it does get granted. We need to know what we're left with. We'll come back to conditions. Thanks for that. Just in terms of the Section 32 assessment, which your firm will have done, you've looked at all the different options, and one of them would have been to rezone the land, which you've gone down that track. The other is to do a resource consent. And can you just recap on what the main reasons for not doing the resource consent would be?
That's certainty.
Certainty, yeah.
And the resource consent process would be a non-compliant activity, which comes with
Yes.
notification risks.
Yep.
And has a limited life for resource consent.
So industrial uses are non-complying in a rural zone. Okay. Yep. Right. Okay.
And the fact that this development may not occur within a 5-year period. So and change that certainty and zoning for future uses in a longer term sense than the resource consent.
So with a resource consent application, you would have to be specific about exactly what activities were going in there, wouldn't you? So
No, you
not
could
necessarily.
create vacant land subdivision and then rely on the activity standards of the zone for development of those sites. In fact, that's the normal way
Right.
that industrial development would occur. Vacant land subdivision and then purchasers buy the sites, construct the buildings.
They apply for their own consents. Yeah.
And apply for their own consents. That is exactly what's happened on the plan change.
18. Yeah. That's right.
Just on that, and I can't remember where I've put my hand on exactly where I've read it, and it may have come from Mr. Vincent, was that potentially there is a risk that if the zone is on the assumption that the zone was changed to industrial and there was only, let's say, one industry going in, that the ability to actually, the financial cost of actually doing some of the works outweighs the industry, what was going to be going in. And I know I'm pretty sure it came up in the 42A report, didn't it?
And in the conditions.
Yeah, in the conditions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can deal with that later.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just what I was.
Yeah. Did you want to comment on that?
I can comment.
Yeah.
I did agree with his comments on that when he said that that's essentially a risk that sits with the developer.
Yeah.
That they develop the site, install the infrastructure, and then that there's no use for it for several years. That's not unusual in industrial. It does take some time to develop, but the financial costs of that sort of develop rather than the public cost.
Yeah.
And we've seen that here in Alex with Santago's development on Foundry Road, which sort of kicked in at the start of the 2008 financial crisis. And as a developer, your timing's terrible.
Yeah.
With what's going on with the planet currently, but that's a risk falls with you, sir. Yes.
Really.
What does tend to happen though is developers are economically rational, and that they do often seek a certain level of pre-sales in order to ensure that there are buyers for the sites before the development, so that they don't end up out of pocket. But even if it is developed and the sites are vacant, there is the rate to take that covers the costs of the infrastructure installed until those sites could get back.
I do have another question, but it's nothing in relation to any of that. Have you guys given any consideration to any, the possibility of any emissions that are going to, and this is obviously post-development, so I'm not, but that is going to impact the air quality in Clyde, given that it is a known area by the ORC for inversion, and the possibility that a change in zone could impact, have a worsening impact for that inversion layer.
That is something that's been considered, and the regional plans cover emissions to the air and set standards that if any activities that would locate on that site would infringe those standards, that will apply for resource consent, and the effects of those activities are then be considered through that application. It's the same as any but they implemented target areas in the policy. It's also quite likely that you won't get a heavy industry located in a site like this.
We're running ahead of schedule, so I'm just discussing how to deal with that. We'll just keep see if there's any further questions for the moment. Anyway, Mr. White. So here. Here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, just a sort of a technical thing, I suppose, from a planning point of view. The section 32A, if changes are, if the panel agrees to changes that are made post notification, it needs a 32AA sort of evaluation, and that'll come down to the wordsmithing of conditions, and there will be some minor changes. But did you see those as being within the scope of 32AA that the panel would have to address? Or are they more sort of condition changes rather than changes to the proposal? Any comment on that?
The changes to the recommended changes to the wrong, in my opinion, were relatively minor.
Right.
Scope.
Yeah.
Mostly wording changes, and there were not significant changes to the scope of the request.
Right.
And it's section 32A assessment that been as part of which request, and that has been considered again as part of section 32A.
Okay, well, I'll ask you, Mr. Vincent, when you come to address your report, just to comment on 32AA, but I understood that answer to be that it's fairly minor and within the scope of the proposal as notified, but ask you to respond to that later, unless, well, do it later, I think might be best. All right. Let's see if there's anything else with it's sort of scattergun approach, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
But that's, yeah, but we've all got our questions and we're just a matter of how to cover everything. Oh yes, I was just going to ask you about the cemetery. You mentioned that the old sale yards in Cromwell, that subdivision there, industrial subdivision, was similar in some way to this one. I think. Is there a cemetery down there? Is it Cemetery Road? I guess is that the key to it? Yeah. I haven't actually observed the cemetery itself. I drove down past the MPD, which and down Sale Yards Road, I think, and then there's a barrier across the road. I couldn't carry on down, but does that go down towards the cemetery?
It does. So
yep.
Plan change 18.
Yep.
Subsequent to the release of plan change, it's had subdivision consent.
Right.
That subdivision consent extends Old Sale Yards Road down to Cemetery Road.
Right.
And adjacent to the industrial development is the Cromwell Cemetery.
Right.
So that's why I made the comments about that recent plan change.
Okay.
In various situations,
Right.
industrial same rules like the cemetery.
And it goes right up, the subdivision goes right up to the boundary of this.
They touch, but parallel,
Okay, so they're very close. Okay.
very, very close.
Yeah, I was the commissioner for Plan Change 18. I don't recall that coming up as an issue, so that's why I wasn't familiar with that. But thank you for that. That's the other question I just found that I had for you. Anything else, folks? I might actually finish by just asking some questions on the conditions.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll go there now, and we'll possibly be finished once we've done that with you. Yeah. Yeah, the conditions on landscaping, and we've already covered those to some degree. They on first glance, they do appear quite specific for a plan, for a rezoning request, but I understand the reasons for them. You know, there's traffic safety and screening. So, you know, I'm not being critical. It's just they do appear quite detailed. I guess one of the key themes, or one of the key issues, is implementation, or, you know, doing the work, doing the planting ahead of development. And we've already talked briefly about that, and Councillor Patterson mentioned that, you know, there's a suggested rule that would require any development on the land to do all the work basically before it might not have happened. You know, it might not have happened up front, but that's the suggestion by the officer, and I think you've agreed with that. I think
I have, and
yes.
I also agree with the approach that they took, and that they are specific. They address matters that are explicitly related to the West.
Yeah.
They are measurable, they're attainable.
Yes.
They will translate well to commissions of subdivision consent.
Right.
They give clear guidance to any future development as to what the design standards will be, what's required
Right.
in the way of planting, and how they're going to be ensured on a high-performance basis. So in that regard, I was happy with them.
Right.
The wording, I had no particular concerns with. Even in fact, my suggestions were good and accepted them.
So just on that condition D, I don't know if you have that in front of you, the condition D, so it must be 1, 2D, is it? The one through the screening anyway. The condition D is, and with Mr. Vincent's modifications, requires the entire landscape strip shall be established at the time of initial subdivision or development, and that's what we've discussed. But the word established apparently is defined, and I haven't got the definition in front of me, but I think it requires plant. You know, it has to be a genuine attempt to plant and put mulch in and irrigation, if that's all that stuff. What I didn't see in there, unless I'm wrong, is the height of trees at planting time. I think the next condition talks about will achieve a minimum height of 4 metres when mature. But are you aware of any minimum height, so that they're not, for instance, planted box 1 or 2 or whatever it is, tiny little trees? Is there any requirement as to a minimum height at time of planting? Is that in the definition of established, for instance?
Established is just
put in
the
place.
time at which they are
Right. Okay.
planted.
Yep. Okay. Because the next condition talks about a minimum height of 4 metres when mature, but I'm just not clear. Would that be covered in the resource consent conditions? Do you think? Would that be? I guess the panel, we need to be confident that if we rezone the land, it's a genuine attempt to put reasonable trees and not tiny little trees. That's all.
The resource consent would cover that, but also the rule could be adapted to ensure a certain level of planting within with a minimum grade of plants.
Right, because it's a fairly specific condition anyway. So I wondered what's the damage in putting another sort of clause in like that. Yeah.
There isn't any particular risk from
no.
and change point of view. There's a bit of a risk of development in local trees that we might establish, but that's
Yes.
with
That's
them and the aftercare associated with that.
Okay. All right. I'll just leave that with you to ponder, and Mr. Vincent might comment on that too. But yes, I think you understood the reason I'm asking that. So that's what other conditions have we got? Can you just maybe just address the cemetery, the noise, where that's got to? I've read all that material, it just doesn't come back to me. There's a proposal, and we're waiting to hear from the council's, or rather the submitter, Mr. Bailey, as to whether your suggestions are acceptable about the noise environment there. Can you just perhaps recap on what the proposal is there to minimise impact on cemetery users, I guess, or people visiting?
When the plan change request was lodged, there was no suggestion of any amendments to the law standards related to noise.
Right.
Then Mr. Bailey, on behalf of council, submitted with a concern about the future extension of the cemetery being adjacent to the site, and there being a desire to build a minimum level of amenity for cemetery and attending funerals.
Yes.
And so in section 42A report, there was a suggestion that rule 9.3.5 brackets 3 be amended to include specific wording in A to apply slightly lower noise standards and boundary heights in it.
Right, that's right.
And from a planning point of view, and also in discussions with the requester, there's no particular concern.
There's no concern with that.
That's just
Right. And you've also noted that down at the sale yard site, there's no such restriction there. So this is over and above anything down there.
this is site specific.
Right. Okay.
That addresses a concern in relation to
Okay.
that adjacent.
Yep. And just while we're on that, the planned extension of the cemetery, does it go right to the boundary of this zone, or is it?
The cemetery site does adjoin the east boundary of the site.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
Mr. Bailey's submission includes the 2020 reserve management plan.
Yes.
for the cemetery.
That's right.
Which shows the extension of burial sites very close to the eastern boundary of the site. Although that may be many years away, given that the current uptake in the Clyde cemetery.
Right. Okay.
That's no reason not to provide those amenity controls. Better to put them into the plan now than try and address it again later.
Okay. Thank you. No, look, I've got no other questions about the conditions at this stage. They may come up again once we've heard from Mr. Vincent and also Mr. Bailey, but thank you for that.
I did have one thought we were talking about landscaping. And suspect that's I was wondering about his suggested conditions, amendments to the conditions, and whether they were actually going to achieve anything, given the fact that the majority of the site is at a height of 167, and the highway, as it passes the site, rises up and by its western margin of the site, when you translate that onto the road, is about a height of 180 metres. So you've got 13 or 14 metres height difference between the road as it comes down and the base of the site. And I was wondering whether the planting that he was suggesting would actually need to be so high that it would create a shadowing effect on the highway. And we've had considered that objective and whether it might be better just to rely on the section 2A version of the rules.
Right. Yeah. So you agree with the principle of not shading the highway. It's a question of whether that condition they're suggesting is necessary.
Correct.
Right. We haven't got any sort of evidence on that, have we? We haven't got any evidence to show us that there won't be shading if we just rely on the other condition. Would it be a belts and braces approach?
You've got to have the ability to rely on the proposed rule to ensure that there isn't shading.
That's right.
Won't be shading.
Okay.
What concerns me is you have that, and then in the rule immediately prior to it, you have a situation that might require planning that would
Well, I see.
create
Yeah.
screening.
So it has a perverse effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
you've essentially negated one of those two rules.
Okay. Right, yep. Come back to address that one when NCTA address us.
Yeah, and that was exact how you put that, because I was thinking, arguably, you may have to have some, and whether this ties into your question about species
Yeah.
determination,
Mm.
because they're gonna have different, at the, I guess at the Cromwell corner, that's gonna have the ability to have a much higher tree than what's right down towards the Springvale Road end.
Correct.
So you're gonna have that,
Yeah,
and if you put all the same in, you're gonna have a shading issue. I was interested to find out how that was gonna be.
mm.
I wondered if that was the species argument.
Yeah. I'll invite you to ask them. Ask
Yeah.
NCTA.
You certainly could
Yeah.
achieve that screen with some quite growing species, but they tend not to be like either wild species, which some or
Solids.
species that are like poplars, for instance.
Exotics, yeah. Fast growing, but
That's right, that they're deciduous, and so they lose their roots.
right, gotcha. Yeah. That's that's an important consideration.
Yeah, it may address some of that shading concern. But
Yes.
that's just a topic that would benefit from this input from this as well.
Yeah. Okay. Just found some other questions I had about conditions actually, but in terms of the sorry, which condition is it? Oh yeah, the point of the traffic stuff. I think it's condition I, sub I. There shall be no more than one point of vehicle or other access from the Clyde Industrial Precinct to Springvale Road, and then there's a oh, it might be J actually, prior to subdivision or industrial development occurring in that precinct. The intersection shall be upgraded, and it describes an auxiliary lane and so on, and it's to be to Ostroad standards. Would it be standard to put a clause in there, subject to NZTA approval? I don't think they've asked for that, but it's just a matter of course, isn't it? If you're doing work on the highway, you would need to get their approval, I guess. But do you think that would be a belts and braces approach to include that in there, subject to NZTA, or to be approved by NZTA?
Any works that occur.
It's just limited access.
Always require
Yes.
approval from NZTA.
That's right. Okay.
And because of that, the rule frameworks seem not
You do not have that. Okay. All right.
Yep. But it always happens.
And it's limited access road as well, isn't it? So it's through there.
It would be any access there to State Highway 8.
No.
From development.
Oh, no.
So that particular doesn't at play the fact that the work would be on highway and therefore would be approved from the TA before they can start.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question in relation to condition in the same one in H. And this could be semantics. There should be no vehicle or other access to State Highway 8 from any development or subdivision. But is that being, what about from, to State Highway 8? What about from State Highway 8? Is that, am I being too pedantic there? Or is that allowing it to come off State Highway 8? If there was an application from a developer in the future.
Interesting point.
I know there is a whole lot of different NZTA rules that would have to go down through that.
Yeah.
But that does, is that something that you guys have?
Yeah. I suppose the question is there any disbenefit in putting access to or from, for belts and braces? You'd have no problem with that.
No.
Yeah. Okay. No,
There's been no anticipation of access to or from.
No, to make it crystal clear. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and there's some
Yeah.
high differences that would make it difficult.
Lots of limited access, it's never had access to the state highway.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And also any access or egress would start to impact on that buffer strip.
Right. Okay.
So no concern about having to fire into that. Wrong.
Okay, look, I don't think we've got any more questions. I'll just ask Mr. Vincent, did you have anything that's cropped up that you'd like to ask questions for clarification before you do your reply later, Mr. Vincent?
Nothing at the moment from me, Mr. Chair.
All right, no, that's fine. All right, so is there anything you wanted to say in direct response to submissions? I know you've covered just about everything, but is there anything you wanted to reinforce? And I did ask you a question about the arterial status of the road. We've talked about noise. Some of the other matters raised by submitters include, is there a need for further industrial land in this location? And that's covered in the market economics report and in your own evidence. I don't think we asked you a lot of questions on that, but is there anything you wanted to say in direct response to submissions at this point?
No, I did note that in the submissions, there were some comments about that might need a industrial area.
Right.
When there is the Alexandra industrial areas in Commerce's way, and that is going specifically in the economic report.
Yes.
So I refer you to that.
Yes. Okay.
Considering those submissions.
All right, no, fair enough. And we'll hear from the submitters later. Okay. Well, look, we've got no further questions, so we'll bring that to a close right now. We're well ahead of schedule at this stage. Now we've got Mr. Brathwaite coming in at 11 o'clock. That's been prearranged, so we'll stick to that. We've got Ms. Axby here. What I intend to do, Ms. Axby, is we'll take a short break for a cup of coffee. And would you be in a position to come on earlier? Oh, you would. Oh, fantastic. And I understand you've got some notes, but you can present and then hand the notes in later if you wish. Whatever you like. And then we've also got Mr. Bailey now. He'll probably be asked to come on early. You'll be able to communicate with him and just see if he might come on a bit earlier. It might be around about 11 o'clock or shortly after. It won't be 11 o'clock. It'll be about 11:15, I would imagine. And we'll just keep boxing on and see where we end up. But we'll take a short break now anyway, for 15 minutes or so. So thank you, everyone, during the hearing. We understand you live at 115 Springvale Road. And is it Greg Rabbit? Is he coming, or are you just going to?
No,
He's not coming.
Speaking on behalf.
Oh, very good. That's fine. No, thank you. And we know where your property is, roughly down by the vineyard, or just a little bit past it on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
We've read your submission, and it's very, very well prepared. Covers a lot of material. Thanks for that. And we're in your hands. You can read some notes, or you can read this out, whichever you wish. We might have some questions for you.
Sure.
But
No problem.
in your hands.
Yes, I guess it's relatively clear from the initial submission that I'm opposed to the development.
Yep.
And therefore come at it from a critical point of view, and filling down some of the information that's being provided to me. I've been a bit disappointed really by some responses of people I've spoken to who see this as inevitable and it's going to happen. So why are you wasting your breath? And I think there's a bit of a view among some people that the easiest course for the council is to approve and hope that whatever happens on the development will all be fine in the end. But to me, a jump from rural resource to industrial resource is just huge and sets a very uncomfortable precedent given the area that we live in. We're talking about a small piece of land adjacent to a small Central Otago town. But I think it sets up some worries for the future. The 42A report states that the industrial resource area designation, as was discussed earlier, is highly permissive. And as the submitter has withdrawn their initial plan, none of us really have any real ideas of what is going to happen at the end of the day and who is going to have control over any of that development, and nothing's guaranteed. I did make some comments in our initial submission about traffic volumes at peak times and how that's changing over time.
Yeah.
And I think in addition to what was happening when I wrote that, we can now add in all the new residential developments that are taking place in Dunstan Road. There are two large subdivisions that are about to start being put together there. And I haven't counted the number of new dwellings or the potential increase in traffic that might result from that. But whatever it is, it's going to go up and down Springvale Road. And in addition to that, I've been asked to, by some of my neighbours, one of whom has just joined me in the adjacency, to highlight the junction of Springvale Road in Young Lane, where there are people who live in Young Lane who do not come up Springvale Road and turn in from that end. They'll continue down the highway and turn in from the other end because that junction is so dangerous. There's barely room to overtake if you're turning right into Springvale Road. And I had a rather risky incident with a truck behind me only recently, because it's also at the top of a rise, so you don't see traffic coming towards you sometimes, even with the slightly reduced speed limits that we've recently had put in place, taking it down to 80 k's an hour. I've looked at the Savvy report into the demand for an industrial area, and I still find the way that it's looked at local geography and some of the reasoning behind it to be a bit questionable at best. Some of the comparisons that are made there, in particular places like Ranfurly and Paotearoa, are really quite fatuous because the distance from those centres to larger, more industrial areas is so much greater than the distance between Clyde and Alexandra. So they're not really good comparisons with what we're looking at here as far as the development of industrial areas and any industrial developments concerned. I don't necessarily agree that increased residential development can be directly linked to demand for industrial development. There seems to be an assumption that the growth in accommodation and residential accommodation in Clyde is somehow a direct link. Especially when a significant proportion of the new development in Clyde is actually specifically designed for our elderly population. So this is not going to make any great difference to that. And I think it's essential that this hearing brings the local knowledge and understanding and good sense to the whole process. With Cromwell continuing to develop along Cemetery Road, and there still being proven vacant space in Cromwell and Alexandra, this seems to be an unnecessary and unwanted addition to the stock of industrial land available. Paragraph 146 of the 42A report admits that demand can be met for the coming 30 years, utilising available and planned industrial land in Alexandra. Even without considering available and planned opportunities coming on in Cromwell. The attitude in that paragraph is something like that it's quite handy to have a bit extra up our sleeve just in case we need it. The applicant has stated in one of the documents that if the plan change is not approved, land and infrastructure resource would be lost to inefficient land use, without really giving any detail of what that might mean. A great deal of effort's been put into how the impact of the development of the site might be mitigated, but it hasn't really considered the view from the top of the hill, I don't think. Coming down that hill yesterday, I thought, I'm not quite sure how you're ever going to block the view of that site from the top of the Clyde Hill. If you're driving down, it would have to be some quite significant plantings to do that. I can understand that further down the hill and along Springvale Road, trees will eventually grow in 5 years or more. But will anything ever really reduce the visual impact from the top of the hill? I don't think we can realistically consider, other than putting the known rules in place, noise until such time as we know the exact nature of the industry that might be situated on the site. And if I'm completely honest, people think living in rural areas is quiet. It's not. Ever since our road was resurfaced some time ago, the noise has grown significantly. And if you have a combination of mowers, leaf blowers and chainsaws going in any particular weekend, noise is relatively high. Clyde is a tourist town and a retirement town, if we're honest. And directly opposite the site in question, there is the tourist hub of the rail trail. The only real industry that used the site opposite the one we're talking about here moved away some years ago when Rory McClellan moved his gas refilling plant into his new building in Alexandra. And what's there now is as a result of long gone railway activities and the building of the Clyde Dam. I cannot help but think that if there really was demand for industrial development, someone might have taken this opportunity a long time ago. Rural Fire Brigade and Coast Guard occupy space on the site, which is reassuring rather than intrusive, and a huge benefit to the community. And finally, the Outer Natural Heritage Trust have their nursery there and are using that to beautify the area around the rail trail offices and many other sites across the district. So to answer a couple of the questions that were posed in one of the applicant documents, my answers would be to them in order would be, is there identified demand for industrial land in Clyde? No. While there's some speculation that there might be, nothing has been proven as fact. Is an industrial zone necessary? No. While other towns such as Ranfurly and even Omacow are a considerable distance for any other urban centre, the distance between Clyde and Alexandra is comfortably commutable. Is the site appropriate for industrial use? It's a rural resource area adjacent to a tourist town and hub for the rail trail. Most industrial towns in smaller industrial zones in smaller towns, and I'd particularly highlight Arrowtown here, are tucked away in a location convenient enough for locals, but out of sight for most tourists. One can, in fact, visit the centre of Alexandra without passing through or even being in close proximity to either the Napara Street or Boundary Road areas. They're not intrusive on the day-to-day activities. Is the site suitable for industrial use? Possibly not. Traffic will always be a major consideration and has been for a long time. That's why the council insisted on putting in the underpass in the first place. But until such time as we know exactly what the industrial development will take, it's really very difficult to comment. One of the things that is not included in my notes, but I did notice when I went and had a look around the Cromwell industrial area, that too is a discrete area. You don't go there unless you want to or have to. It was the amount of on-street parking around Cromwell. And that's people working in those businesses, people visiting those businesses as customers and suppliers. But the amount of on-street parking, I was very surprised by. It's not an area I generally drive around the streets of. Could an alternative site be equally appropriate? Of course it could. The CODC also already have sites under consideration. It would be far more appropriate to consolidate industrial areas rather than the apparent scattergun approach to siting industry all over the place. In Cromwell, they've managed to achieve a clearly defined and delineated industrial development. Overall, I can see no reason to approve this plan change other than perceived compliance with little consideration of the community and values of Clyde as a tourist and retirement town. There's no proven demand. Alternatives are readily available both now and in the future, and alternative uses could be identified. If researches such as water and wastewater can be made available for industrial development, surely they can be made available for other land use, unlike most of the rest of Springvale Road, apparently. This is a bit of an opportunistic application, and the contradictory statements contained in the report should lead the panel to seriously question whether this is the right type of development in this location, and whether making this leap from rural resource to industrial resource without any definition of what that really means is an appropriate outcome. And I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. XB. That very well put together, I must say. Very good presentation. Thank you. Number of things in there. I'll just see if the panel have any questions, but first of all, and I think I've got a couple, but I'll just hand over to the panel first.
Yeah, you brought up the Savvy consulting, which was one of my main questions there. In relation to the medium term demand. Okay, so you've suggested that there is more than sufficient land, and when they've said the report says that they're going forward, I mean, obviously we're not talking about a snapshot for today, but going forward, that demand is going to be is going to exceed. Now, as a resident, we all know that the population demand in Central Otago has far exceeded what any of the projections were. How can you explain a little bit further how you disagree that there is irrespective of location, that there is going to be less, that the demand for industrial land is not going to be increasing with the increasing in popularity?
That's not what I said. I just said that the two, in relation specifically to Clyde.
Yeah.
That there was not necessarily an argument that said that the growth in population in Clyde automatically means that there is a requirement for industrial development in and around Clyde. My argument is that the population of Clyde can grow, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to have, or anyone has to have, an industrial development on their doorstep, or any sort of what has apparently become the Clyde Industrial Precinct, which is what it's evolved into. Whether that's required in that particular location when there are others identified, when clearly the location of Cromwell means that it is the prime site because of its geographical location for industrial type developments for the region, supplemented by developments in and around Alexandra. So it's the Clyde aspect of this particular piece of land that I'm speaking to, not the wider demand for industrial development in the region as a whole. I'm encouraging it to be looked at from Cromwell to Alexandra and points in between, without it impinging on Clyde.
Okay, so it's more just solely directed at Clyde as opposed
As
to
part of the population development and link between that and the population of Clyde and the need for industrial.
Okay, and I have just one other question in relation to the roading, and obviously I acknowledge that you said that you've had some close calls. In the event that the strip, the laneway, essentially, if that was created to a standard that was appropriate for a actual pull-off area, so you had a proper NZTA approved, would that give you some reassurance that would help for alleviating any?
I think that the roading has obviously been very seriously considered and no less than one would expect it to be. There is obviously, we are as residents of Springvale Road, primarily between that end of Springvale Road and the turn off to Dunstan Road, we are seeing an ever increasing volume of traffic for a variety of different reasons, whether that's residential growth, whether that's the new turn that was put in recently, or the heavy transport to access the Monte Cristo winery, whether that's in additional developments in Dunstan Road, which are automatically going to cause an increase in traffic. So it's a cumulative effect that I think we're concerned about. And I think that the fact that the junction to Young Lane may well need some attention at some point in time in the near future as the volumes increase is not something that can't be dealt with.
Okay. Thank you.
Martin, any questions? Okay, thank you. Just got a couple of questions. Again, I was really impressed with your presentation and the thought you put into this. And I just had some questions. It's always interesting whether an industrial zone, not necessarily a whole lot of factories, it could be a collection of, of less intense uses that are not big bulky buildings. Just looking at that, that plan is not an actual plan of subdivision. It's just a conceptual plan of what might happen. So it seems the intention is to create a number of smaller lots, and it could be a myriad of activities. But my question was, when you're coming down off the road, you can clearly see that site. And I think the landscape report Mr. Moore prepared acknowledged that, and he did some viewpoints coming down, and he came to the view that some planting will mitigate it, but I don't think he intended to screen the site entirely. And
No.
my question of you is, do you think it's important to screen the site entirely? Is that something that you think is essential?
I think it's one of the fundamental questions over the site, isn't it? And that goes to the point of where any industrial development is located, full stop. And as I said in my presentation, I was very interested in the way that this had happened in Arrowtown, and whether that was deliberate or not, purely accidental, I don't know. But it's tucked away outside of the area where people are going to have to see it. It's not a particularly attractive welcome to Clyde. Whether it should be completely screened, would that make a big difference? Would that mean the difference between approving and not approving? That's your decision.
Because it appears to me that a lot of industrial areas at the fringes of townships, I'm thinking of Timaru, Washdyke, there'd be a lot of examples, Hornby and Christchurch, where you approach a town and it's not uncommon to have an industrial area leading into the town. I'm not saying it's probably a good thing, or it's been just, yeah.
It would be.
No, but what the point I'm trying to make is that where is has the council got a mission to put industrial zones away from view, to screen them so they can't be seen into it? Is it so offensive that they need to be screened or in entirely separate pockets away from anyone's view? Is that what you're asking? I'm just teasing it. That is, you're asking that, okay.
If you go around the outside of Cromwell, you cannot avoid knowing that there is an industrial area there. Most people would not drive through it. Most people would not even necessarily use McNulty Road on a regular basis, or certainly Cemetery Road. Right. I haven't been down Cemetery Road for years until I went down there. And I mean, looking at the size and the scope of that development, and that's huge.
So this development here of a scale, I think it's 4 hectares or 5 hectares. Yeah. Is that? Are you saying that that's of sufficient size and uncertainty as to what might happen there that it should be either entirely screened or put somewhere else? Is that's the bottom? Yeah. Okay. Understood. Yeah. All right. That's fine. And I think you've talked about traffic. We've had some questions on that. Look, I don't think I've got any more questions because I understand exactly what you're saying. I think I just needed to tease that one thing out because I've often, and I'm going to ask NZTA it as well, the importance of screening development, which is on the face of it, small scale, small buildings. Is it offensive? Is it offensive to see them? That's the question I've got, and I'll test that with the other witnesses.
Yes, and it will change over time.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's no question about that at all.
Yes, okay,
You know, I mean, if you are going on your site visit, then,
Yeah.
you know, you can have a look at the kind of planting
right.
that they've been doing in the little corner just by the rail trail.
Yes, I was going to, thanks for reminding, I was going to ask you that because you're a local. But
Yeah.
it's my observation, I've been here quite a lot of times, but it seems a hostile environment to grow things, but you've just told me an example of where there is happening. Yeah. Yeah.
They obviously work closely with the Polytechnic and there are a number of projects going on in the
Right.
region over dry planting, but
Yeah.
most of that will not be tall planting.
No,
I mean, I can
Okay.
tell you from my personal experience of the need for irrigation. And,
yes,
you know,
Yeah.
my trees will not grow without water.
that's right.
And I,
Yeah.
you know, we've done a lot of new planting around our property recently. And
Yep.
have the good fortune to have.
So it's a matter of putting
irrigation.
in the care and attention, getting things well established and mulch and irrigation, all those things are very important. Yeah.
I mean, most New
Yep.
Zealand
Mm.
natives with a bit of water will grow in absolute rubbish.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, okay.
we all have
Mm.
that layer of gravel underneath
Mm.
a relatively narrow layer of topsoil in which we're trying to grow.
Sure.
And I think that site might be marginally worse than what, because it's, but they do have the benefit that they're at the bottom of our hill, so they're
Yeah.
getting some water that's flowing off.
Very good.
Yeah.
Understood. No, look, I've got no further questions. Thanks very much. And your neighbour who turned up, you probably haven't lodged a submission, but we'll just make a note of your name. What's your name, sir?
Right.
Ian Gray. Oh, yes, you did lodge a submission. Yes, okay. Yep, that's right. Did you endorse what's been said? Obviously, you're supporting.
Absolutely,
Yep.
yeah, no, I just think it's such a shame that we're gonna finish up, looking down on an industrial area, coming down there, and beautiful little historic Clyde. That's what Clyde is all about. And
Yep.
the centre of Clyde and what it is a
Sure.
beautiful little town.
Yes.
And to have an industrial area that's exposed for everybody to see when you're coming down that hill is just.
Well, understood. Yep. Right. Thank you for that. That's that message is coming through loud and clear. Thank you very much for
Thank
that.
you.
Okay.
I'm assuming if I've answered your questions, I wasn't planning to stay for
No.
the whole day anyway.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome to leave when you wish. Yeah, we're well ahead of schedule anyway.
Yeah.
But look, thank you very much. We've got a couple more submitters to come, and then the officer, then we'll be finished.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Thanks for coming along.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now, we had NZTA booked in at 11. We've also got Mr. Bailey. They're both online. It's just a question of, well, maybe if we take Mr. Bailey first, is that okay, Mr. Brathwaite? Is it okay if we just take 5 or 10 minutes with Mr. Bailey first? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, I probably should be looking at this, shouldn't I? Yeah. Sorry, that's okay. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come to Mr. Bailey, who'd like to submission. So I'll just get up in front of me. Thank you very much. There we go, Mr. Bailey. Right, there he is. Very good. Thanks, Mr. Bailey. We've read your submission. Welcome to thanks for coming online to the hearing. We've read your submission. There's been some responses from the applicant, the requester. They've responded and come up with some suggestions to mitigate the noise and so forth. So we're in your hands as to how you want to address us, but look forward to your response to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, Gordon Bailey, Parks and Recreation Manager for the CODC. So I just thought I'd just run through a couple of things. So I just wanted to emphasise that in the next 5 years, the vacant portion of the Clyde Cemetery will begin to be developed for burials. At the moment, just to give some context, between the 20 years between 2020 and 2019, there was an average of 11 burials a year in the Clyde Cemetery. That's a mix of ashes and interments. And since 2020 to 2025, that's increased to 16 burials per year on average. So the cemetery, I guess, what I'm trying to say is getting busier, and will, as you talked to the last submitter about, increasing population is likely to get busier over time. And I guess just to relate that to traffic, most burials that go there generally come along the state highway and turn in and then turn out. So there is, you know, funeral corteges from time to time that happen, which add to the traffic flow in that area. That's
Yes.
just to give some context in there.
Okay.
I think the key part of my submission was to ensure that if there's somehow that we need to keep providing a quiet place for contemplation and reflection, and for burials when they occur on those sort of 16 odd increasing days per year,
Right.
so that people can you know, enjoy that place either at the time of the funeral or when they're out you know, remembering loved ones. I do note there's some landscaping proposals in this 42A report, which I'm reasonably satisfied with. Could suggest that I couldn't quite tell whether there was a planting bund for that, which would also could help mitigate any noise, which I'll get onto onto shortly. But the I guess my concern with the planting is the maintenance and perpetuity, and who would be doing the maintenance, because you know, sections change hands for whatever purpose, and some people are very diligent and some people are not. So we need to set up some sort of, if the applicant was successful, some sort of body corp or something to ensure that, and condition that those whatever planting between the cemetery and the development were to be maintained in perpetuity by the owner of that land. Just the noise issue, yeah, typically burials, as you will know, occurs between sort of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on a given day. And there has been some suggestion of, yeah, we do have a consent condition in Cromwell, but I can't see that working in this area, as the officer has said. So the reduction in noise down to a more ambient level, maximum level, would be useful for consideration for the panel. I'd be reasonably happy with that. That is less than the standard for the area, essentially. And what else have I got to write? So yeah, yes, and sort of a 2 meter high bund with planting on top would also probably help mitigate some of the noise. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's unknown what type of activities will be on the site, so it's very hard to plan how to mitigate those on the site at the time. And I think that was all I was going to. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I was just trying to highlight those 3 or 4 areas.
Thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Bailey. That's all understood. In essence, you're satisfied with the mitigation measures proposed, but you've also requested a bund to be specified in some way. The normal process would be, if this plan change is approved, I think there's 2 sections, potentially there could be 1 or 2 sections adjoining the reserve extension. There might only be 1, but yeah, there'd essentially be a developer or a landowner who would be conditioned in some way on top of any conditions that apply to the whole zone. But that could be one suggestion, a bund for that developer when they come to do their consent. Mr. White might be able to comment on that later as to whether he would anticipate pulling that forward into the rezoning, or whether it would be done at a later stage. But it is quite a good suggestion, I must say.
It's just 2, 1 for a bit of noise, and 1 also to give that a bit more height, I guess, for the planting that might happen on top of that mound.
Yes. Okay.
And a bit more instant as well. Yeah.
Right. Any other questions? Just see if there's any other questions now.
Yeah, Gordy Tracy here. In the 42A report at paragraph 51, it says Mr. Bailey has not specified how they would prefer effects on the cemetery to be managed. Is that what you were just? Is that you're talking about the bund and bits and pieces, is that a little bit more specific, or is it something that would come at the time of development? Or is there anything specific now?
I think the two specific ones would be the noise, which I think been suggestions been put forward, and also the planting, and perhaps planting with a bund would be more helpful as well. So yeah, that's really like screening the cemetery, or the the development from the cemetery would be that, get it the right way around, and then from the noise into the cemetery. So if we can mitigate those two, they're probably the two effects that would be the major issues.
Anything, Martin? No. Okay. And just finally, we heard about the Cromwell industrial expansion that comes up to the cemetery, basically down in Cromwell. You mentioned it yourself. Was there any concern when that was? Did your department have any issues there, or was it you stayed out of that, or did you make any comment on that? Any concerns?
So there is a bund around that part of that cemetery, which will be planted. So part of that is, plan of it is, significant planting around that for screening around that cemetery from all the industrial sites. Yeah, it's just where it happened to be, I suppose. We didn't. Yeah, it was developed. And
who did
part of the development?
Who did was the planting already there, or was
no, it is to be done in stages over the next little while.
Oh, I see.
That part of the main part of that cemetery won't come online for another 20 to 30 years. So it's just going to be essentially a paddock. So over that time, plants will grow. In time, there's some interments in there. Hopefully, there's significant screening.
All right. Thank you. No, look, that's excellent. Thank you very much for covering those matters. I got one more
question.
Sure.
Sorry, there was some suggestion by another submitter that the plants would need to be at a 2 metre height within 2 years. How realistic do you think that is on the site and in Central Otago in general?
On that site, yes. That put on top of a mound, that would be fine.
Yeah.
I think you could buy 2 metre high trees, but I think you're right, in that site and condition we'd probably get smaller ones that would get established root wise better before they got root rot. So it might not be a condition that could be achieved too easily. If that's what you're thinking.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go to you now, Mr. Brathwaite. Thank you for coming online. And I know you provided a statement of evidence, if you like, and we did have some questions. We thought it would be quite useful to have you online, so rather than send them to you in writing. So thanks for coming on. Yep. All right.
Perfect. So as you'll be aware, I'm senior planner with New Zealand Transport Agency. I assume we can take my evidence as read.
Yes.
And I think we're probably best just to proceed to questions.
Questions? Yeah. No, look, that's fine. I've got a couple I'll put to you first of all. Just in terms of your paragraph 4, or your section 4, paragraphs 4.1, just wanted to understand why NZTA would be concerned about screening the site. Is that more an amenity concern, or is there some safety reason for doing that?
So I guess that's more in regard to amenity. So I guess the landscape effects assessment has identified there are effects that they want to mitigate as part of the proposal. The 42A report has asked that NZTA provide their comments on the landscaping considered necessary to mitigate the effects of the proposal. And in response to that, we've suggested some way to mitigate that.
Right. Okay. So I understand you're accepting that there will be planting and screening, and you want to make sure it doesn't cause effects in terms of shading and
correct.
The light.
And our original submission was that the predominant point was that any landscaping proposed would not have that shading impact on the state highway.
Right. Okay. Now, okay. Did you want to ask a question about it? We had Mr. White, for the proponent, did raise with us earlier, and you probably weren't online for that, about whether the condition you were suggesting for shading was required, and it's quite a technical discussion, but there's a chance that if we were to adopt your suggested condition, it would lead to it would conflict with the other condition being offered by Mr. Vincent. I'm not sure how best to put that. Did you have any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, just in order to
Yes.
with some of the planting that has been proposed and the
Yeah.
height of that, how that would actually, some of those trees, timing. I'm not so sure if you're that completely familiar with where you're asking a tree to be at 2 meters within 2 years is, as you would have heard Mr. Bailey say just before, is given the site is quite unrealistic, unless you're purchasing semi-mature trees. And the other thing is that some of those trees that to be planted, in order to get to that height, they will inevitably have some shading. So, yeah, in order to reach the height that you're required is not actually, for the site, it doesn't quite work.
So, firstly, in regard to the shading on the state highway, looking at the road reserve through there, there's a minimum width between the carriageway and the edge of the road reserve of about 16 metres, I think, at the smallest point. And then we're also looking at a 10-metre buffer. So combined, you're at 26 metres potential setback from the edge of the carriageway for a tree that potentially, I think we've asked for 1.82 meters, that kind of height. So realistically, there is more than sufficient setback to put trees there without without the effects of shading on the state highway, somewhere within that 26 meters.
Thank you.
In regard to the planting, typically we do ask for planting to be established within approximately 2 years after planting of the trees, just to make sure that it does actually give effect to the purpose of the mitigation, which is to provide that screening. So yes, I would probably expect that semi-mature trees would be required for the screening along that boundary.
All right, is that open?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Look, possibly just 2 more questions. Are you satisfied that the slip lane off the highway into Springvale can be accommodated within the road reserve? You may not have drawn a design up yet, but there's enough space, enough road reserve to do that?
Yeah, given there is about that 16 metres road reserve between the carriageway and the edge of the road reserve, there's more than sufficient space. Right. And it just need to be designed by appropriate designer.
Right, okay, thank you. And the other question I had was to do with the underpass. I had a look at that yesterday, and it seems to be working quite well. And then there's a potential issue with connection across Springvale onto the site. What was NZTA's interest in that? I noticed your paragraph 9.2. It can be considered as part of the subdivision proposal as part of council's exercise of its control over the provision of access. In other words, you can look at it at the time of subdivision, and then you said or through consultation with the landowners if the subdivision aspect is not progressed. So if the subdivision aspect is not progressed, I presume you mean if the whole site's developed as one activity. I don't think that would necessarily require a resource consent. So I'm not sure how the council would be engaging with the landowner. But I guess the bigger question is what do you see that as a potential issue at this stage?
Not significantly. So I guess that bit that I've mentioned in paragraph 9.2 is essentially a reflection of how council intended to address it within the section 42A report.
Right.
And in regard to the underpass itself, I believe what our concern was pedestrian and cyclist access into the township, and just ensuring that is sufficient to provide that access.
Okay, thanks. No, that's understandable. Yeah.
That was already decided earlier.
Oh, you
to and from.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, we won't.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, no, look, that's good, Mr. Brathwaite. Nothing else, Martin? No?
No.
Okay, well, we'll let you go. Thanks again for coming on. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay. All right, so that's we've had the submitters come on. And we now go to Mr. Vincent. If you're still there, we'll just box on with you. If well ahead of schedule, but we'll carry on. So thank you. Thank you for that. We'll probably have some questions for you, although a lot of my questions have been answered in the course of discussions. But I suppose the first thing is to ask you if there's anything you want to respond to in terms of what you've heard today before we go any further.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a couple of points. I'm just going back through my notes very quickly.
Yep, sure.
One of the things that probably would have been better to check when Mr. Braithwaite was here was with NZTA's suggested condition on landscaping. I'm not sure if it was picked up or addressed that he mentioned any point that it would be measured at any point along the state highway. So at any point along the state highway, including all the way up the hill, the permitted activity standard would say that everything would have to be screened by vegetation, not just along the front of the site. I'm not sure how practical that would be. And that's kind of my main concern with potential for shading. Because
yes,
if I was having a very quick look basically just on street view from going down the hill, you'd probably be looking at 10, 15 metre tall trees there at a worst case scenario.
That's right. Now, yeah, I did ask him a question about the amenity side of it, and as I understand NZTA's objective, if you like, is not to get involved too much with amenity. It's more safety and efficiency on the highway. So I didn't understand him to be saying that he's seeking the whole site to be entirely screened. I think the way he answered my question was he's aware that there's discussions about screening, and he's only entering into that because of the concern about potential shading. So I didn't take him to mean he would want 10-metre high trees all the way up the road.
Yeah.
Unless I misunderstood.
I guess
what you're
commenting on amenity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
he was commenting on amenity, but I don't think that's a principal concern for NZTA. I mean, I used to work for them. I'll declare that now. 7 years as the regional planner, and that's certainly not what I understand their concern would be. But
okay, I guess to clarify my point on that, I don't think I'd be able to support their suggested standard 2B, which is that will block direct line of sight measured horizontally at any point in the road corridor from ground level to 1.8 metres above ground level.
Right.
I think that would be more workable alongside the site, but by the time you're looking at any point of the road corridor being the top of the hill, you're all of a sudden needing much bigger vegetation, much taller vegetation, which to my mind is more likely to have an impact on shading of the carriageway.
Right. So just to recap, there's a lot of conditions in front of us. What you've just said, is that captured in your 42A conditions, or is that something
that's
in
from Mr. Braithwaite's?
Mr. Braithwaite's? Yeah. So you would support?
That's on page 4 of his evidence. I wouldn't be able to support his point 2B in paragraph 4.2.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Understood. You wouldn't be able to support. Just repeat that. Section 4.
2B.
Section 4.2.
2B.
And then specifically, it's his a lot of numbers. It's his recommended change to rule 9.3.5 4D2.
Oh yes, that's right. Understood. Okay.
But so having something like that alongside the site might still be effective for managing views across the highway, but at the same time that also feels a little bit redundant when the highway is already elevated.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? We can ask you some questions if you like, but if you had anything else you want to address up front, please do so.
I think the other thing that was mentioned was sort of the types of activities that could happen in an industrial area, and the specific point around cycle businesses potentially shifting out there because it's closer to the trailhead. As it's already been pointed out, the industrial zone that we've got at the moment is, on the whole, very permissive. That's why you've in Cromwell you've got quite a few commercial office consultancy type firms operating out of the industrial zone there. Retail is limited to small scale in association with an industrial activity. So we've taken that to mean that if you're operating a commercial business out of there, you couldn't also have a retail component associated with that. But if you were manufacturing goods on the site, you could have a small stall selling those goods, for example.
Yeah. Okay, so retailing is limited to being in association with an industrial activity generally. So just general retail, a carpet shop, those sorts of retail would need to go through a consent process. What about a bike sales shop, just straight cycle sales, as opposed to hiring?
Straight cycle sales would require resource consent.
Yep. Okay.
If you were just operating a rental business, then my take on the retail, the definition of retail activity is because that's not selling a good, that's selling a service, that would be permitted. What
about activities that might seek to establish there to attract passing trade, like petrol service stations, fast food, those sorts of things that to replenish the driver who's going past on the highway? How would they fare?
Fast food or like convenience food would be retail. A service station would, I think, in the examples that we've got in Cromwell, those haven't had consent. Or they haven't had consent for the service station specifically. They generally breach signage standards or access.
Right,
I can double check those if you'd like, Mr. Chair, just to refresh my memory.
Yeah, I did get involved with the NPD station at Cromwell, and I think you're right. The activities permitted, but they invariably run foul of the sign standards and various other things. Usually access, and they require resource consent. But from Ms. Axby's presentation, and others, there could be a concern at the type of activities that could go there as of right. I think anything that needs a resource consent gives council another level of, and the residents, if it's notified, another level of control or assessment. But it's those permitted activities that we'd need to be concerned about potentially.
Yeah. I think that's fair, and it is something that, as an as among the planning team, we've been aware of as an issue, particularly for example, residential activity in industrial areas has not worked as originally intended when the rules were drafted. That was one of the things that was on the schedule to be looked at before the government changed the RMA to stop us.
Yes. So just on that, residential activity, I presume would be required to be in association with like a supervisor or manager who lives on site, or is it straight residential that would be permitted? Do you know?
It would allow the rules would allow for straight residential, but there is a acoustic insulation standard that it would have to meet.
Okay.
Around internal noise.
Okay. All right. So just to summarise that section, having heard the questions of the panel and the presentation by the submitter, are you satisfied that that this plan change, if approved or granted, is appropriate, given that there could be a range of activities that may not be subject to further scrutiny? Some will be, but there might be some that aren't. Do you stand by your opinion on that in the 42A report?
I do stand by what's in my 42, particularly when I'm looking at sort of the wider area, the current and predicted character of the area through the Vincent Spatial Plan. I think that's. I think that's would be an appropriate range of uses. Yes.
So the Vincent Spatial Plan, we asked some questions about that. That it recognises some activities that are already there, historic uses, I guess, too. This proposal will sort of expand on that a bit, but it's in the same location. So that was sufficient for you to say that it's generally in accord with that plan. Is that right? Am I summarising that correctly?
Yes, that's fair. And I'd also add that even though that industrial zoning is effectively providing for the existing uses,
Yep.
it would inevitably allow for more intensification of those two sites in the future.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, say that again, please. Yep.
So while the spatial plan is nominally providing, like formalising those existing uses,
Oh, yes.
there'd be no reason why those two sites couldn't be further developed in the future.
Oh, I see. More intensification, for instance, on those sites. Yep.
Correct.
All right, understood. Yep. Okay. So just if you have any questions, just chip in. I'm just working through.
Yeah, just Adam, can you just going right back to the start, and this is at point 7 of your report. Obviously we've had Mr. Bailey come in. Is it normal for a council to come and be a submitter essentially? Because obviously, I've obviously read that point at point 7 that you've professionally done that, but there's obviously some significance in relation to the cemetery there. So can you talk me through that, please?
I think to my mind, it would be fairly unusual. That's effectively the process that Mr. Bailey decided to take. I hadn't spoken to him up to that point either about it. Okay. So generally, it's preferable. I guess generally, as a reporting officer, I'd go around and speak to relevant departments. Like I've spoken to an engineering team, but this is just how it's fallen in this case.
Okay, so it doesn't impact it either way.
I don't think it would. It's still providing the panel with the same information that he would have provided if I'd gone and asked him as a staff member to staff member.
Okay, thank you. And just in relation to the big stormwater channel that's coming down the side of the hill as you come down into there, and I did mention to, and I'm not sure if you would have heard me speaking to the requester earlier in relation to the usage of the defunct water race. Are you sufficiently happy that would be going forward on the development, provided development happened there? You're happy that would be sufficient, that water race, to hold if there was a significant flood coming down through that channel?
Yes, I think that, along with the underlying ground conditions, which sound like they're fairly rapidly get water going through the soil, so I don't see that as being a big concern. No.
So no liability for council, essentially, because it's council infrastructure that could impact potentially private use.
Yes, there is I guess there is a risk if that water race were to fill up and then catastrophically fail. But to my knowledge, it wouldn't hold. I think I'd have to have gone back out onto the site and had a look at roughly how much water it could contain before I could comment further on that. But it wasn't something that I was particularly concerned about when I was writing my 42.
Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Did you have any questions about the planting? We had a discussion with Mr. White about minimum height of planting, or I don't think he was opposed to the suggestion of having a minimum height specified in that condition D. There's reference to established planting, but do you think that's essential for the plan change side of it, or is it more a resource consent matter as to what height those trees are planted at the time of development?
So currently there'd be no minimum standards, with the standards that I've drawn up being focused on the outcome, not necessarily how long it took to get there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not opposed to having a minimum size on there.
Okay, I suppose,
Effectively, if the request is happy, I don't think it is. It's not something that I think would be vital, because the difference is essentially the length of time that it takes, which to be fully effective.
yes,
Which I think if we need to, we can work through as part of a subdivision consent, like part of the specifics of a subdivision consent, or could be discussed with the landowner if it was being developed outside that.
okay. Right, I suppose having a standard at this level, if you like, the plan change level, sets a scene for other, like there could be potentially, 20 odd sites developed, and it'll probably make sense to have a standard that applies to all of them rather than assessed individually. But anyway, that's for you. You don't see a need to bring a 2 metre suggestion in at this stage? Or do you? Sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I don't think it would be necessary, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be opposed to it if it was put in.
Oh, I see. Well, we'll see what the requester responds on that point. Yeah. Okay. Just working through the report, see if I've got any other questions. We've probably answered most of them. Yeah. Screen. So I was looking at those new. Yeah. So that's underpass. Okay. I think, just to summarise, there seems to be a considerable amount of alignment between you and Mr. White, isn't there, really? I'm trying to find anything where there's disagreement, and you might be able to remind us if there is any, but I can't see it at the moment.
Very happy, Mr. White, so not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were on most of the same page. There were a couple of, well, there was one minor change that Mr. White suggested, which was just fixing a typo that I missed when I was drafting the standards, changing Cromwell to Clyde, which is
just things like that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
No, I don't think there was any major outstanding points of contention between us.
Yeah. One thing we didn't discuss was the NPS, highly productive land, and I think I understand all the evidence on that. And clause 365 provides a sort of a pathway through, doesn't it? Because there is highly productive land on this. Well, it's class 3, is it? LUC 3, which technically brings the NPS into play. But this is a case where the expert evidence, including Ms. Hampson, is it, for Savvy, yourself, and Mr. White have told us there's a pathway through that clause 365.
Yes.
I don't think we've had that clause quoted in the evidence, but we can look that up. But I've encountered it before.
Yeah, it's effectively that if we're rezoning highly productive land, we have to make sure it's the minimum necessary to provide the requirement capacity while still achieving well-functioning urban environments.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's essentially you take as little as you need and nothing more.
I see. Yeah, that's right. It's certainly been addressed. I don't think we had the actual quote, but we can look that up. Thank you. No, look. Yep. I suppose that the final thing I'll ask, unless there's any other questions, is the sort of big picture. This is development going across the highway from Clyde. There's been a lot of evidence given to us that Ms. Hampson and others, about the demand for industrial land and the peculiarities of who owns the land and what it's being used for, and the constraints over it being used, and also the district plan sort of hold that the government's got on at the moment for doing council promoted plan changes. And this is a direct applicant or developer response to that. They're entitled to do their own private plan change, but When you look down on it, it is development across the highway. There is an underpass and there's transport connections. You don't have any residual doubts about the sort of planning that's proposed here. The sort of you might call it ad hoc, not being unkind, but it's certainly is brought ahead of other planning, except for the Vincent Spatial Plan, which partly addresses it. But they're the sort of big picture things we need to consider. But you're comfortable, taking your 42A to be comfortable that this is appropriate given its scale and location?
Yes, it was something that I gave quite a bit of thought to, because that highway forms quite a nice natural edge to the town.
Yes.
Ultimately where I landed was through Plan Change 19 and through rezoning the land between the highway, Young Lane and Springvale to large lot residential.
Yep.
Council's already effectively made that decision to allow jumping the highway. And that's not just in the spatial plan, that's through plan changes that it's initiated.
And did plan change? Sorry. Yeah, carry on. Sorry. Just with Plan Change 19, did the Otago Regional Council get involved with that? Did they make any strategic sort of submissions about where development's going? Do you know? Can you recall that?
Not that I can recall. If you'd like, I can find out.
Well, it's probably not critical. They haven't lodged a submission here, but that you're right. That the facts are that Plan Change 19 did zone land, and that's happened, isn't it? However it has happened, and on this side of the highway. Yeah. Okay.
And,
no, look,
and to the points raised by the submitters today, I do agree that in principle it would be preferable to have your industrial zones more agglomerated together. But when I look at the industrial zones in Alexandra in particular, I don't see any obvious locations for them to expand while still being a contiguous area.
right.
Along Napara Street, you're bound by Boot Hill and residential developments. Down Boundary Road, you're bound by the river and more residential developments, as well as residential zoned land. So there's no obvious spaces for them to grow going forward.
And
So
that,
you're
that
in that
reminds
space of needing to find a new area anyway.
That reminds me of one further question. The discussion I had with Ms. Axby about whether industrial zones are so offensive that they need to be totally screened off, and she would prefer them to be away from the highway, away from view, as she gave some examples of where that worked really well. And I gave her some examples of where you drive through industrial areas to get into townships and cities. Is there anything in the Central Otago District Plan that encourages separation of industrial zones other than amenity for neighbours, noise and other traffic and all that sort of thing? Is there any amenity directive in the plan to locate industrial zones? I'd be surprised if there was, but I was just curious if you happen to know that. Is there anything at a strategic level about where industrial zones should be located?
Let me have a quick look in section 6, because if it's anywhere, that's where it'll be.
Yeah, have a look, because we're well ahead of time. So yeah, what's that?
So that's executive scheme.
Oh,
15 metres just on using AOA.
all
So
right.
there's your.
All right. Do you need to ask them a question about that? Do you need to ask them a question?
No, I was wondering about that because
Yeah.
we talked about the specificity of funding.
Sorry, carry on looking. We're just having a side discussion. Sorry.
That's fine. The only provisions I could find were sort of fairly generic, sort of requiring urban areas be expanded in a manner that manages its effects on various things, which is policy 6.4.2.
So
There's nothing
more
specific that I could find about where you might locate industrial.
No, okay. It's traditional land use planning to separate them for reasons of, effects on neighbours, pollution, noise and all that sort of thing, but not necessarily visual amenity, but there might be, and that's why I thought I'd ask you.
No.
Okay.
I do take the point of the submission, but I think that's where landscaping can come in, similar to how it's been managed in Cromwell.
And would it be as a planner, would you see a need to screen them from view entirely or to mitigate the screening. I think that's the view Mr. Moore took, was to mitigate it rather than totally screen it. Is that right?
Yeah, I follow that as well. I don't think it would need to be completely and utterly screened, but breaking up the views would help.
Okay, very good. Look, I've got no further questions at this stage, so I'm just not sure whether there's total alignment on conditions at this stage, but we'll come back to Mr. White in his reply to see if that is, just to confirm whether that is the case. But there might be a couple of wordsmithing things, but that might well be it. Be useful for us to know anyway if there's any difference of opinion on conditions. All right, so there's nothing else for us to ask you at this stage. So thank you. Look, would you like a break, or should we just carry on? Would you like a break to gather your thoughts, or do you happy to?
I'm quite happy.
You happy to respond now? Okay,
Yeah.
let's do that. Right,
And
very good.
would appreciate any input
Yep.
from Mr. Vincent. This is,
Yep.
given we're such a small hearing.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to discuss and tease out issues. Almost this was.
You know, yeah, I prefer to do what we can in the room rather than have to do it with written communications later. So, you know,
It is so much more efficient
Yeah,
from everybody.
it is.
To
absolutely.
resolve issues as far as possible now, rather than trying to do it.
Yeah.
Through different methods. And we're running so early, we've got time.
We have got time. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, we'll hand over to you now. And I guess, you know, it's your chance to respond to the sort of nitty gritty stuff, but also the bigger picture things that were raised by the submitter. You've heard a lot of questions we've asked, but, you know, we're in your hands as to how you wish to respond. And you can also do a written reply if you wish, whatever suits you best, but we're happy to hear your verbal
Let's
comments.
see where we get to.
See where we get to.
At the
Okay.
end of this discussion.
All right.
And there may be some benefit in that. Let's just see.
Okay. See where we get.
One thing, if we start with the big picture of issues.
Sure.
And big picture issues, to my mind anyway, is there a demand for a additional, is there a demand for an industrial area anyway?
Yep.
So in my mind, that's the strongest evidence we've got on that so far is still the economic assessment.
Yep.
That indicates that there is a demand, and particularly as a result of residential growth implied, creating an additional population which has a demand for industrial activities, and the constrained supply of industrial, particularly in Alexandria. I see some differences between what types of activities would locate here versus the types of activities that would go in the Cromwell industrial area. Cromwell industrial areas I see mostly as serving almost a region-wide, region here, I'm thinking of the Central Otago area. But Cromwell industrial areas, because of its location advantages and the fact that there's lots of zoned flat land, and it's at the junction of the triangle formed by Alexandria, Queenstown and Wānaka, and is at the end of the major transport routes into Central Otago, that the types of activities you get in Cromwell are likely to be larger scale, particularly distribution, and some of the larger service type industries. I'm thinking here of machinery suppliers, the larger contracting type firms, both civil contractors and also the larger construction firms, particularly things like roofing, framing, buses, windows, where there's a significant transport cost associated with them. For Clyde and Alexandria, I see a need to provide additional land to service future demand, more probably for smaller type industrial activities that have more of a local service function. And I'm thinking here, local contractors, service stations, contractors, yards, builders, tradesmen, those types of activities.
Yep.
I don't see it as being a terribly attractive location for residential, although not prohibited or in fact discouraged by the site provisions. I also see some advantages in there being more suppliers of industrial land. So you don't have one significant player locking up the supply, which helps both with the cost of development and then keeps purchase prices, hopefully keeps purchase prices lower because there's some competition in the market. It also means that there is likely to be availability. If you've got a couple of suppliers that, or more suppliers, you have a better operating market. Theoretically, you have a better operating market. As to where you would put an industrial area in Clyde, given the area on the western side of, say, Highway 8 to the Clifton River has now been zoned residential with the exception of business areas. There's no opportunity to put it between western State Highway 8. Maybe there's some logic in, given that there are already existing industrial activities on Springvale Road, particularly the complex storage area and the fire station. There's some logic in co-locating those areas with an industrial area. And that's reasonably consistent with what's anticipated by the Dunstan Structure Plan. Although this plan change does take that further than anticipated from the structure. I also see some advantages in enabling industrial activity before there is a demand for it. That means that there's, if you have a demand for it, it is available to be developed when that demand arises, as opposed to a lot of planning which tends to be reactive to demand. There was a question before about the time that supply coming on, and Box and I discussed that at the moment too, and he had some thoughts and some comments on at what stage he is the landowner and possibly the developer and contractor might bring that supply on, assuming that the site is zoned. Did you want to comment on that?
Oh, it's going to be a time, isn't it? You know, before your decisions made and then more planning required. You know, it's still probably 2 years away.
Yeah.
Realistically.
So what? Yeah. So just trying to understand it. Ms. Hampson, was she saying that that's acknowledged, but is there a demand now? I thought she was saying there is a demand now.
I think she does say there is a demand.
Yeah.
And
so for certain types of industrial land. Yes.
Yeah, and that is going to increase as a result of population growth, but also as a result of particularly the Alexandra industrial areas filling up.
Yeah.
And once that happens, then
I see.
Vincent said,
Okay.
well, we're asked, do you go?
Yeah.
As suitable as this location.
Yeah. No, that understand.
And,
yeah. So you're not entirely relying on, let's do this before the demand comes. There is an element of demand now, isn't there? Is that right? Or is demand for this, the type of small scale, local based activities? So,
there is,
yeah.
that will increase over time.
Okay.
Due to population growth and the existing industrial areas filling up. And that's a different type of demand to what I'm expecting to see.
Yes.
Although there will be this sort of demand as well, that's a global service type industry. It's not problem, that's certainly that's adjacent to it.
Okay.
There is also a point that has actually brought up is that the economic report considers the provision of industrial land and all of the other swings and target towns as well.
Well,
And it's, from my understanding of the report, she was looking at that in the context of saying those towns do already have industrial areas. Quite a growing industrial, growing residential area.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it have it? It's fine.
right. Yes, that's right.
But there's also slightly different demands and uses for industrial activities in those areas. Those are essentially rural service towns. The sorts of activities that you get in Ranfurly.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it, because that's essentially said by Ranfurly. Roxburgh, they're all reasonably remote and remote from other centres. And you do tend to get the sales, the trade servicing, the rural contractors. I don't see that sort of activity going on so much here, but it is a possibility. I see a differentiation between those sort of activities and what's going on here, but also would put weight on her comments in relation on Samson's comments in relation to those issues. I agree with Mr. Vincent's conclusions that there is a demand. Site is suitable for industrial activities.
Yeah.
Submitted expert touched on whether there's going to be precedent associated with the request. I don't think there is in this case.
I don't think there's a precedent at all with plan changes because each one's simply independent of the next. And I mean, someone may choose to lodge another industrial development plan change, but that's not a precedent. This one would not set a precedent. It's a matter of law. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
It's often when laymen are talking about precedent, what they're actually thinking about is, could this be the beginning of a larger industrial area? And my answer to that is the existing constraints mean that there is no way that this area can grow beyond what's proposed. Well, a cemetery on one side, which is a reserve. You've got a state highway, you've got another area road. And to the northeast, you've got a bank that's just too steep. Or any sort of those sort of large, reasonably flat land. Typically building comes on scale, you can't do that on sloping sites.
Right, understood. Yeah.
On the landscape issues, there is almost complete agreement between Mr. Vincent and myself on the level of landscape effects. And I did note that Mr. Moore's assessment of the level of effects was undertaken before the proposed rules were strengthened in the section 42A report. On that, I see a lower level of landscape effects than when he'd done his assessment. We've mitigated some of those effects from a low level already by the proposed rule framework.
Right.
And I'll touch on the specific landscape mitigation with different topic.
Okay.
On the highly productive land provisions, questioning whether clause 36(5) had been covered anywhere in evidence. And I did note that in the section 42A report, paragraph 117.
Yeah, no, it was certainly, it was covered in evidence. I just wasn't sure that the actual clause was,
Quoted.
was it quoted? Yeah, I didn't see it quoted there, but I might be wrong.
No, it may not be quoted.
Yeah, that was all I was saying.
Referred to.
Yeah, that absolutely, yeah.
And on the specific point of, yes, it's identified as Article 3, but
Yeah.
the assessment of that undertaken the application.
It's assessed in the 32, is it? And
It's assessed in the application.
right,
Index of L. And that notes that, yes, it's LUC 3,
yeah,
which is considered to be highly productive. There are some specific constraints, particular to this site.
right,
That means it has never been used for productive activities that depend on the productive capacity of the soil. It has previously been used as a chicken farm,
yeah,
but that was, what, the 1970s?
79, yeah.
all right. Yep, so factory farm.
Yeah. And since then, there have been various attempts to obtain water from the irrigation company, the water rates, but that's now no longer operational, and they confirmed that 2004, I think it was, that water was not available.
Yeah, and just while we're on that, I know Councillor Patterson asked a question about irrigation water to get the planting underway. Is that coming from a bore, or it says town water, isn't it? Is that what you said? Is that what your answer?
It was,
So
yes.
that's for irrigation. Yeah.
Well, and in fact, I was about to touch on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
On irrigation water supply.
Yes.
They requested build a bore on site and couldn't find water,
Right.
which has meant that
Right.
this site has never been able to be used.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
a rural productive activity.
Right. No, that yeah.
It also means that there's no alternative water source
No.
other than reticulated water,
Right.
and reticulated water would have to be used to irrigate to get plants established.
And is the water metered in Clyde? Is it metered? Yes, you'd be paying for it, but it's yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. No, look, that's I couldn't quite understand. It seemed like a dichotomy between it's not able to use from productive land, but there's water for doing the irrigation.
Yes,
but you've explained.
A bit of a strange.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's no water for the rural uses.
Yeah.
But there is water for
Yeah.
urban uses.
Yeah.
Like, to extend the network to be able to.
Can I just
Yes.
ask you, expand it? Current conditions, the responsibility to the developer as far as the landscape, that will all kick in once you look for subdivision consent. That's when there'll be a consent notice put on those titles as far as the irrigation. That will give us the sure. Currently, it's not. There's no mention of irrigation in.
Correct. Yeah. What, maybe I can answer that now.
Yeah.
And maybe lead on to some discussions about this, with advanced applications. Typically, what happens once land's zoned for a particular purpose is that there are rules in the district plan that, in this case, relate to landscaping. Those rules then flow down into the application for the land use or subdivision. It's normal for industrial areas, developed industrial area, to start with a subdivision consent. Right. So that subdivision consent poses a specific design. That specific design is assessed against rules in the district plan, and if something like the proposed rule gets implemented in this plan change, would flow down as a condition of consent that would require landscaping to a certain standard in accordance with that district plan rule to be established as part of the subdivision consent by the developer. Those sites are then bought by a purchaser who then undertakes the, in this case, the industrial activity on the site, and have an obligation through the subdivision consent to continue to maintain the landscaping in accordance with the plan.
Some sort of body corporate structure, I assume,
In this sort of development, I would expect that it will be a fee simple subdivision.
Yeah.
That typically fee simple subdivisions do not have a body corporate. And the reason for that is body corporates are great when we're talking about a vertical building with typically multiple units in it, and body corporate covers the water tightness of the building, the external appearance of the building, the function of shared areas, car parking, landscaping, lifts, etc. But in this case, I would anticipate a standard development model would be to do subdivision consent and vest the road, which I anticipate shared area and council, which is responsible for that paid by rates. But the landscaping will be required to be maintained in accordance with the conditions of subdivision consent through a consent notice, which is a condition of the subdivision consent that requires compliance with that condition continuing basis. So, simplify that, sites developed, the landscaping installed by the developer, but the purchaser is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of it.
right, so you've got a variety of purchases and some of these purchases may and value the landscape, but how do we as a council implement those conditions or enforce those conditions if one of your, though, chooses not to irrigate that piece of land opposite their property? Because that's basically what it's boiling down to. The landscape strip, the developer puts in to the conditions, but then it's up to the owner of that, who you want to sell that to maintain it. How do we police that?
A good question, and this is an issue that every council grapples with in these sort of situations. It would be normal for council to impose a consent notice on the subdivision. So a consent notice is a condition of a subdivision consent that is required to be complied with on a continuing basis. And that consent notice, I would expect, would create an ongoing obligation for the landowner to ensure the maintenance and continued health of that landscaping, and that's normally consent notice this is done. And I'm thinking here particularly of the extension of Old Racecourse Road. That those sort of conditions did tell on. Then it's up to council through its normal enforcement and monitoring processes. If that compliance isn't being done, they have a mechanism to go back to the landowner and say, there's a condition on the title that requires you to undertake these works. You're not doing those in accordance with the condition, please comply with that.
Because nothing's going to grow unless it gets water. The developer, I assume, is not going to be putting in a comprehensive irrigation system in, because to irrigate that land would come off each of those individual sites, the water, because that's the only way the cost of that water can be captured, is is from the individual owners of those sites. And I can't see how we're going to be able to develop a landscape environment on the road side or on the cemetery side without there being water.
I agree, you are going to need any landscaping on here is going to need water and to get established.
That would be brought in probably by the truckload, not, but assuming not proposing put in an irrigation system.
No, I would expect that the condition of any development application on the site will be to install planting, including irrigation, mulching, staking, and pest control. And the purpose of those four components is to get the planting established.
And that would come with the application for subdivision.
Yes, and that would be a normal.
Yes, that's
of a subdivision.
I sort of hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I guess once all established and you sell the sections.
Yeah.
Then that individual section owner is responsible for the irrigation for his lot of trees.
Yes, yeah.
So then they'll have to be separated.
Yeah.
To that individual section owner.
And
Is that what you're?
it's probably something Adam could probably answer for, because I'm just unsure of how internally in the process that it is actually gets administered.
Yeah, it's, that, what you described is correct, and this happens everywhere, but
Yeah.
I think the point you're making is on a consent notice on subdivision has got more teeth, if you like, than a resource consent condition, which,
Yeah.
because it's an enduring, it doesn't matter who buys the site, it's enduring on the title, isn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
It's on the
The-
side, yeah.
The consent notice is a condition. A condition of consent says to the developer.
Mhm. Yeah.
Plant the plants in accordance with the landscape plan subdivision.
Yeah.
And then underneath that is a consent notice condition, condition of subdivision consent that says, here's your obligations for the ongoing maintenance of those plants.
Yeah, at least what's been proposed here is that the initial establishment happens. So I've seen developments where they just don't happen. To be frank, they just don't get developed at all. Whereas this would be done in one broad brush, and then the ongoing maintenance is a responsibility of the owner. And I suppose that's as far as you can go with.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there, so for context, that's pretty much exactly what's happened with Canepa's development in Cromwell. Is the developer put in the plantings and the infrastructure with subdivision consent conditions for irrigation, and then a consent notice condition, which if any individual owners fail to comply with, that's a criminal matter under the RMA.
Yeah, and that's the way it's done. But you got chopped off there, but
I did. I was going to point out here, the subdivision process has specific plans that are approved through the subdivision consent. Then there is a check at the end of that process undertaken by council, which is the
Oh, yeah.
and that demonstrates council satisfaction that the as we're talking about landscape and everything else has been undertaken in accordance with the approved plan. So at that stage, council has the authority that the planting that it wanted has been constructed to a standard that it's happy with, and that could cover plants design.
My naivety coming into the fore of done plenty of plan changes, but none of conditions as far as landscaping is concerned. Just wanted to.
It's not naivety, it's a very valid concern actually, but it's, I think those points you're making,
thank you.
the 224 means the titles aren't essentially issued until they're not issued until the planting's done.
224 certificate is a precursor.
Yes.
For land information to them for issue new titles.
Yeah.
And the 224 certificate is a certificate issued by council. So it has and should and does check that the conditions are compliant with the standards before approving. Here's what we want. Make sure it's done according to the standard, a check process, sign up process, and then the title.
And the consent notice ensures.
Correct, and then a consent notice says these are the things that need to happen on a continuing basis.
Look, no, that's understood. Thank you for that. Good.
That probably leads to a discussion about the form of the landscape.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking here, particularly how does Rule 935 Romans 4 work. Way that I agreed with the proposed amendments to that proposed in section 2A report. I was raised a certain concern about the evidence of MDTA.
Right, yes.
And my concern here was that what they had proposed wasn't practical
Yeah, that's right.
due to the height difference between the site and the highway, and the fact that the highway, as you get up towards the dam, continues to rise above the site. So I was interested in your questioning of NZTA there, and the response that they didn't seem to be overly concerned about the screening effect of the trees.
No.
They were more worried about fading.
Yeah.
And that's probably true, because as you come down that hill, driver gets a complete glimpse of Clyde.
Yeah.
Right hand side down the hill, and the same will happen on the side. And there is no ability to completely screen the site due from the top of the hill, the height difference. And if you could screen it, those trees would be so tall
Yeah.
they would shake
Go
up.
to cover. Yeah. Mhm.
So to solve that issue, I preferred the section 42A version
Right.
of
Yeah.
9.3. Particularly B. One that's certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
It's on page 57.
yeah, I think what would be useful, whether or not you do a written reply is your call. We won't ask for it, but what we would like is a clean set of conditions that you're recommending, and we could probably work it out, but there's so many font changes, and you've included some of the NZTA ones which are discounted. It would be nice just to have a clean set, and then we've got a definite list of conditions that the requester is happy with, and I'd imagine they'll be, Mr. Vincent will be agreeing with those too from what the evidence is, but at the moment it will make it easier for us to have a clean set. If you don't mind providing that.
That should be no
Shouldn't be a problem, no.
No, it's just a case of taking off.
Taking off all the,
Yeah.
yeah,
And the only change I suggested for any of those four proposed rules was just a typographic correction of Clyde instead of Cromwell.
I think there's a couple of commas and bits and pieces that I've noticed, but that's by the by. Yeah, just to avoid any doubt with our own interpretation, should we grant this plain change request, it would be nice not for us not to get it wrong, to not include red ones, it should be blue and so forth, yeah. Because I think what you've done is included the NZTA ones and then suggested they shouldn't be in there. Have you done that, or?
No.
Oh, you haven't done that, okay.
My evidence was produced before the ZTA's evidence.
Oh, it was too.
Was
Okay.
prepared, so
Okay. Well, it would certainly make it easier if we had a clean set, and yeah, if you don't mind doing that, it shouldn't be difficult.
Yeah.
That'd be very good, thank you.
while we're talking about landscaping, as a planner, I didn't have any particular concern about including some minimum heights of trees at planting.
Right.
I suspect what would come in a detailed design plan is a combination of lower growing plants.
Yeah.
And there must be some trees in there to get the sort of height in the screen.
Yeah. And just remind me, Mr. White, the rule framework, if for instance it's specified 2 metres, and that seems quite high, but if it's specified 2 metres minimum and a proposal was for 1.5, would it be a non-complying activity, or would it be, because that would be quite a difficult hurdle to get over if I had a feeling that failure to comply with the rule was non-complying, but I might be wrong. I saw it somewhere.
I'll just take a moment to have a look.
Yeah, just keep that in mind, because we wouldn't want to be so inflexible that it caused a non-complying activity for a small group. Oh, there it is. It's rule.
It'd be restricted discretionary.
Oh, is it? Because what's paragraph 49? Then that's something else. Is it? That's non-complying for traffic transport stuff. Okay, so it's restricted discretionary. Is that right? Okay, that's fine. Well, that seems a much better pathway. All right. So going back to you were saying as a planner, you would potentially support a minimum planting height, but you're maybe not sure what that should be, is it?
Well, what I'm thinking is, you only have different planting types.
Yes.
You're going to have ground covers.
Oh, yes.
And tussocks.
Yes.
Which are never going to get to.
No.
So 1.8 to 2 metres.
Right.
And then you will have some trees.
Yep.
And it's quite possible to put a minimum height and type of tree.
Yes.
Those trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the expectation that those will grow to be 4 metre high.
It's going to be quite complex, isn't it? If you, yeah.
No, I don't see this as being that complex.
You don't? Okay.
You could either do it as a change to the wall framing, but I don't actually, and I think this is what Vincent said as well, I don't think you need to include that. Because what we're really worried about here is the minimum height that that planting gets to, more than the height that it goes in at.
Yeah, within reason, you know, if you're wanting some sort of screening effect, you don't want plants that are 30 centimetres high, for instance, you know, or trees planted too small. But I take your point, there's ground cover and then there's trees. And if there's no minimum height specified, you could potentially get very small trees that take many years to get to that height. I'm not sure whether Mr. Moore had that in mind when he did his assessment. So you don't see a need for it? Okay. It's all right. I'm just teasing it out. I mean, there is still the resource consent screen, you know, assessment that has to be performed anyway.
And I think it's a case of getting a balance between.
Yeah.
Generally, you want to get plants of particular trees of a suitable minimum size.
Right.
Because they establish better.
Yeah.
Particularly in dry environments.
Whereas
if you put them in too large, they obviously but that's not a concern.
Well, it is. I'd imagine with a 10-metre strip running around the site would be a very expensive exercise of larger trees. Yeah. Anyway, I guess if you provide a set of final conditions with what the request is happy with, but you know, I think all I'm doing is signalling if there's no restriction on planting height, it could potentially be abused. I guess that's the only concern I'm raising, but it might not be a valid concern because of the resource consent process. But you know, I just put that to you to consider.
You do have the advantage here, there being a subsequent consent process.
Yeah.
That will look at the landscape design in total and consider if the proposed planting is appropriate.
Yeah.
And council does have discretion over that landscape.
Yes.
There's also the restriction from NZTA too. So depending on the height restriction, if you said there was a.
Yeah, well, that's right. The NZTA restriction would be encapsulated in the conditions, wouldn't it? That's the condition 2 about shading between certain hours and so forth. I mean, the other way I've seen it is just to express an intent in the rule that planting shall be of reasonable size, and then that's interpreted through the consent process. But the idea of a plan change or a zoning is to set the scene for what's expected, what's the expectation, and planting shall be of some reasonable height when it's planted, if it's trees, and then the quantum or the height is determined later. There might be worth.
His opinion on this.
Yeah, we'll ask your opinion too, but ultimately the panel will consider anything you put in front of us in terms of the final conditions. But Mr. Vincent, in terms of that sale yards zone extension, those sorts of things, have you got any experience of this at a plan change level, you know, in terms of specifying minimum heights, or is it more an intent? You know, the landscape plan shall achieve the following, you know, is that the approach that was taken there, or would you need to look that up?
It's not something I have specific experience with myself. With the Clyde industrial expansion, as you'll be aware, Mr. Chair, the standard for landscaping was effectively what the requester originally proposed here, which was just a requirement that a landscape strip be established and didn't specify anything further than that.
Oh, right. So this is on that.
This whole I guess, iteration of being more specific came about through me noticing that if you said landscaped, that could just be a patch of grass under a district.
That's right. That's right. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but we'll invite you to put something up that addresses that. Any further questions? Yeah.
I guess on that side of things, it's it doesn't have to be a 10, what you're saying is it doesn't have to be a 10-metre strip of trees. It can, because otherwise that's going to be a,
Hedge.
yeah. It was a landscape for visual amenity and buffering, wasn't it? Yeah.
Effectively, yes. It was trying to make sure you didn't get tall buildings right up to the edge of the highway with nothing to help soften that transition.
That's correct, and
Yeah.
to take that a step further, picking up on this point is that effectively this is a 10-metre building setback as well.
Right.
So that is more restrictive than typically you would see in an industrial area.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that buffer at 10 metres is more than the plan stipulates currently.
Yeah, probably 5 or something like that.
Then you've got a-
Against a road, it's no setback.
No setback. Okay. All right. No, look, that's we had quite a detailed discussion on that, but I think the evidence is in alignment. It's just a question of what the ultimate conditions end up looking like for us to consider anyway.
Okay.
So thanks for that.
There was also in Mr. Bailey's evidence some suggestion of a fund along the.
Yeah.
Now there is already a small fund.
Yeah, is that shown on that plan?
That is shown on.
Yeah. Right. Wondered about that.
Represent the
Yep.
existing height of that.
Right.
And I want to think we discussed it on site. That was topsoil that was stripped by the Ministry of Works. Yes.
That's already there.
It's already there, but it's only about a metre high.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And going to 2 metres is quite high as a fund.
Yep.
You'd think with a fund, you typically have 1 in 3 sides on it. So every metre you go up, section of the should not slope on both sides. To get to 2 metres, you end up taking up most of your 10-metre buffer strip. So my suggestion here is leave that as it is and the rule we've just been discussing.
Yep.
And either leave it up to the developer at the time, and then they may have some topsoil that they scrape off that gets put on that area there, that's the height.
Yeah.
That's a matter of detailed design.
Okay.
That can be considered through the subdivision and development process. But you do have in that rule strong guidance about the outcomes that you want to achieve.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
They did say in the report that there was it couldn't be used for clean fill. The topsoil from the point couldn't be used for clean fill.
Oh, that's on the
Yes, if you said there was scrapings, that whether that is considered enough to be okay for planting is maybe that's for development side.
Yeah, it'll be assessed. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yep, that's understood.
Well, we're thinking about that boundary. It's probably also opportune to think about how the cemetery might develop. And I did see in his submission, there was a copy of the cemetery plan.
Oh, yeah.
And that shows some additional planting on the cemetery side,
Right.
surrounded by a stone wall. There is a proposed 10-metre buffer strip along the cemetery boundary as well. So this case you'll get the industrial development with its own buffer, and then the cemetery with its own mostly amenity planting. And then the stone wall that they're proposing. There's nothing that I can see coming out of this plan change that would impact my need development. The way that they are anticipating that reserve management plan.
Okay.
The other point about the cemetery is noise, and that wasn't covered in the original request, but did go in as a proposal. And brought 9 through 5.3 from the section 42A report, and that proposal was accepted by evidence. So
an alignment on that.
And that there's some concerns about noise amenity for burials.
Right.
Did also note that he was satisfied.
Yeah, he seemed comfortable with that. That's what I took from it.
He did also talk about the maintenance of that landscaping strip. That's a discussion. Required on basis.
Yeah.
The shading issue on landscaping next to the highway. Has always been contemplated in the section 42A report, and no concerns on the requester's point of view, and then specifics of that would be considered at the development stage and the planting designed to be able to achieve that. I didn't know Mr. Braithwaite talked about any trees being 10 metres plus the distance between the boundary and the carriageway, and talked about 16 metres. Don't think that's quite correct, because I would expect that any replanting occurs anywhere within 10 metres. So it might be as close as 16 or as far as 26 metres away from the carriageway. And of course, further away you go, the less shading effect. And that I haven't done any measurements to confirm whether that 16 metres was correct, but assuming it's the minimum standard, there is majority of the road frontage to both the highway and Springvale Road that look to be found within that metres. So that the road is outside the area of the plan change. Any works associated with any future development on the road would require approval from council if it's in relation to Springvale Road, or NZTA as the operator of the owner. So that gives the road control authorities some say in that. That probably leads us into discussion about the transport components of the request. And in this regard, it's well worth having a look at the transport assessment that's included in the application about design standards, not about the separation distance between both intersection and the Springvale Road to Highway 8 intersection. That's why the plan's got the 168 metres as a distance between the centre line of the
Yep.
So I Springvale Road and the same time, there's intersection. Didn't seem to contend about
No.
that location or about there only being a single connection to Springvale Road, as well as any contention about there being no access to or from the site of the state highway. And that's something I've taken note of and include well, 7-1-3.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, we've read that traffic report. I don't think any of us had any questions of Mr. Carr on that, and we note that any non-compliance with those key standards about access would be non-complying. So that's all I just mentioned before. That relates to transportation issues. So yeah, they're pretty stringent rules. Yeah,
They are.
Yeah.
From experience, NZTA are very conscious.
Yes.
About particularly safety concerns, and on that regard, the left turn lane.
Yep.
Might actually solve some of the concerns from Zaxby about the safety of that intersection.
Yep.
That left turning lane is granted by the requester. The proposed conditions would accept on that front. And you've also got the benefit here of injuries on the state highway. But not that would normally be sense. Well, just can't convert some state highway into task approval. So there is a secondary approval process that would come in to do specifically for that.
Yeah.
On her point about increased traffic, that is just a natural effect associated with development. At the moment, these increases are not associated with this development. Of course, it's not going on at this moment, but there is going to be more traffic on Springvale Road just through the population increase. But we're still going to be getting some fuel.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that proposed condition deals with this safety issues and that intersection will be safer as a result of that.
Yep.
Both for vehicles and cyclists. I suspect that most cyclists will actually use the others rather than cycle through that intersection.
Right. Yeah.
On the council, didn't know that NZTA seemed to be in agreement with Mr. Johnson. And yeah, we have specifics about the operation of the council. I think it's something that can be considered as part of the future development. That's covered off all of the rules and unusually there's complete agreement between myself and that decision we started on the statutory tests.
Yeah.
And also the design component of the request.
Yes.
So
yep.
I'm happy to adopt the recommendations there and my evidence through those specific conclusions, and I stick with those and see nothing in today's discussions that would change any of that assessment.
Okay.
So with that, I'm happy to close unless there's any more questions or
Thank you. We've had quite a might appear a laborious sort of traversing of all the evidence, but it's, you know, this is a, I'll say it, you know, it's a fairly significant proposal in that it's rezoning a chunk of 5.6 hectares of land that will have a lot of ongoing uses of it. So we have to be very careful in considering it. And but you've been very, you know, comprehensive in your assessment. Thank you for that. Yeah. So subject to you providing a list of clean rules, they're not conditions, they're rules, aren't they? Rules to go with the rezoning request. And anything else you wish to do in written comment. I think we're satisfied with the responses you've given, but if you want to provide any written summary, you can, but we're not requesting it specifically. It's just those rules that we'd like to see. Subject to that, we'll adjourn the hearing. We'll adjourn the hearing now, and thank you to all those who have participated. Mr. Vincent, thank you very much for your very good 42A report, and I thank all the submitters for their time and effort in putting submissions in, and we'll wait for that final set of rules, and then the panel will deliberate and issue a recommendation to council on this rezoning request. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tarrant.
Thank you.
Yes.